generosity of people right across Scotland. The incredible generosity of people right across Scotland is now helping us to protect and save lives in all of our priority places, where millions of people are facing coronavirus on top of their other needs, from food and clean water to shelter.
In South Sudan, the DEC is funding the Tier Fund programme to provide local communities with better information and advice to stop the spread of the virus.
In Yemen, children is teaching simple ways of washing hands more effectively with soap and providing emergency nutrition.
In Syria, as another freezing winter approaches, we are working with Oxfam and others to provide frontline healthcare workers with hygiene kits.
In the displacement camp to Somalia, the Camp Rohingya settlements in Bangladesh, in Afghanistan and the Democratic Republic of Congo, your donations to the DEC are collectively funding a big part of the relief operations in these countries.
As we know, here in the UK, months of uncertainty lie ahead. But for millions of these most vulnerable families, they so badly need your help. Please, if you can, take a moment to donate what you can to the DEC at dec.org.uk. Thanks so much for your solidarity, for your compassion, for your support.
I hope you managed to hear that okay.
Yes, you.
That's great. Let me just give you a couple of slides then, if I may. Confirm that you can see the slide of the wee girl on the screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, just to reiterate, the main reason for joining your meeting is just to say again a big thank you to the council for your continued support. It really makes a big difference when sort of Scotland comes together as a whole behind the DEC. It makes a huge difference. And this wee girl is from a displacement camp near Aleppo in northwest Syria. And you can see with this funding, we can provide families with food basics. So she's got some oil and some food supplements there. So let me just give you a little bit more detail on what we've been doing. So despite the domestic challenges, as everybody is grappling with at the moment, this has been another successful appeal for the Disasters Emergency Committee. We've raised, with your help, about £3 million across Scotland and around 30 million across the UK. And so that has enabled our members, and there are 6 of them across Scotland, which you just saw in that video, 14 across the UK, to respond in our priority countries. And just to say is the challenges remain huge with winter coming and all the other effects that these vulnerable communities are having to deal with. And because of the scale and duration of this pandemic, we are very unusually going to do another push for donations in January. I'll maybe come back to that at the end. So just to reiterate, or maybe let you know if you haven't read much about the DEC, that it is a coalition of the main international development organisations, humanitarian organisations across the UK. So there are the 14 on your screen. And when we get the money in from you and others, we divide the money up between those 14 member agencies with a thing called the indicator of capacity, which is generally related to the size of these organisations. So your Oxfams and your Save the Children's and your Red Cross tend to get more of the pot, but everyone gets a little bit. So no one will get less than 3%. The maximum an organisation will get is 20%. And through that, and this appeal, we normally just appeal for one country, one part of one country, has been across the globe. And we selected back in July these 7 countries to respond. And you can see now there are 42 active projects across these 7 countries funded by the public donations, which we're still getting in. And then just to give you a rough overview, of that 30 million, 13 million has been allocated so far. We have 2 phases to our appeals. We have a phase 1, which is more on the emergency response. And usually the phase 2 response is about helping communities to rebuild after a disaster. So that will kick in the next couple of months. And so you can see the funding has been roughly spread across those 7 target countries. And then, again, depending on how closely you follow humanitarian action and development action, these are the kinds of activities that our members will be doing. And apologies for a couple of the abbreviations. WASH, some of you may know, stands for water, sanitation and health. So quite often that's a huge part of any humanitarian response. And you can imagine in a coronavirus pandemic, it's a crucial thing. Lots and lots of help has been distributed literally through providing clean water and soap for people to improve their hygiene to stop the spread of the virus. I'll just give you a snapshot of 1 or 2 countries. I won't go through this all, but I will certainly, I'm happy to share this presentation with anyone who might want it afterwards. So no surprise, Yemen is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. There are millions and millions of people in need, and there are still huge problems ahead. There's an ongoing conflict, as you're probably aware, and they're hugely lacking in many basics, exacerbated by an ongoing economic crisis, and of course a continued conflict between the forces in the north and in the south. So just to give you a little flavour of how this works, so these are the member agencies who are responding in, and the map then shows you the parts of Yemen where this work is happening. And again, there's a breakdown on the kind of activity they're doing. On to Syria. Again, the biggest challenge in Syria, beyond the ongoing civil war, which I'm sure you've read and seen much about, northern Syria and northwest and northeast Syria, where most of the displaced people are with the ongoing conflict, is getting very cold now. So it's going to be a very difficult winter for the people of northwest Syria, northeast Syria. And so again, there's a lot of work that we need to continue doing there through the winter. I'm going to skip through a number of slides now because these are quite repetitive, but just to give you an idea of what we're doing in all the target countries. And again, I'm happy to share this afterwards. Just briefly then to summarize, to reprise what I said before, more money will be made available in the new year towards the second phase of the appeal. And given the ongoing problems in the pandemic, the appeal and the activity of our members will carry on for another year from January. And as I mentioned at the start, because of these unusual circumstances, we will be launching more communications to ask the Scottish and UK public to donate in January. Just thought I'd touch on the wider situation. You'll see at the bottom of this slide, the main UN body which oversees humanitarian relief across the world is called OCHA. It's the Office for the Coordinator of Humanitarian Affairs. And literally this week, they've released their global snapshot. And you'll see here that across the world, there are 235 million people that will need this kind of assistance next year. And that's up from about 165 million just last year. So the recession due to COVID, ongoing conflicts, mass displacement, extreme weather, hunger and disease are leaving millions and millions of people still in need. So if you ponder this with all the other items you have to deal with on your agenda, I'd love you to think if there's any way you can support us again in January, if not financially, maybe another way. We'd love to hear your thoughts on maybe how we could connect with other local authorities. You're the leading local authority in Scotland in supporting the Disasters Emergency Committee. And we're aware that probably many people across Scotland and the council and other councils might be thinking about the environmental and climate agenda towards the summit in Glasgow next year. Feel free to follow us on Twitter and other social media. And again, if you feel moved by any of the messages that you see, then please feel free to share those. So that's just a brief canter through from me. I'm more than happy to take questions if any of you may have them just now.
Robert.
Sorry, just want to say it's really gratifying to learn how our contributions affect for the better the lives of so many. Where the contribution is made, we know that it will help. Today, you have proved it with those slides, and real human beings benefit from it, and in some cases, it can make a difference between life and death. I think Jim has a question. Jim?
Yes, thank you, Provost. It's 2 or 3 questions, to be honest. First of all, can I thank the for the presentation today, and also commend DEC for all the work it's been doing over the years, and it's exceedingly good work to do. My first question is regarding the aid, and I'm also glad that obviously Inverclyde Council have committed so much funding over the years, and hopefully we'll be in a position to continue to do some of that in the future. But what I would say is, first question is regarding Yemen, what's happening in Yemen. How difficult is it for your AIDS workers to get food and medicine supplies to the communities that are suffering, particularly those communities that are perhaps suffering more than others? Is there obstacles put in your way by the Yemenese government and their allies? So that's my first question, and I'll just ask the other 2 whilst I'm still on, if that's all right. And how are the UK and devolved governments helping out, and how are they doing that? And my last question is, obviously there's delivery of foods and medicines. There is dangers for your own workers who are doing that. So what ways or how are they being protected to ensure their own safety? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for those questions. I'll just pick up those straight away, if that's okay. So the situation in Yemen, as you say, has been very, very difficult for years. And basically, the DEC wouldn't launch an appeal for a particular part of the world if there wasn't humanitarian access. I'm not to sort of diminish the challenges. We are able to get access and obviously get supplies into both north and south. But you'll be aware, obviously, the different regimes in operation in the north and the south. I mean, without getting too political about this, and obviously be aware that obviously the DEC is a strictly neutral organisation and doesn't take any sides in that sense. But in terms of the access to the south, which is backed by the Saudis, as you probably know, I guess they are more Western friendly in that sense. So the corridors are more easily accessible from the south through Aden and other places. In the north, obviously, where the Houthis have the new government, then there are far more limitations on aid and how aid is distributed, because there is much more opposition or nervousness to Western aid agencies being involved there. So, maybe to take the third point before I come back to the government support. There are huge problems. There always have been, obviously, in operating in conflict locations. So if there are international or national staff, obviously they are very well trained. But I think it's worth sort of pointing out to the people at the meeting this afternoon that increasingly humanitarian action should be delivered through local people, because they understand the context of where they're working, and they're likely to be safe. Obviously, if they are working on the behalf or with our member agencies, we have a duty of care to them. But increasingly, humanitarian aid is being delivered through local people, and that's something that the DEC and our members are trying their best to make that transition in the coming months and years. And I probably should have mentioned the support from both the UK and the Scottish government. The UK government, despite the recent changes, obviously, to the Department for International Development, and also the disappointing cuts that were announced last week. The UK government has backed this current appeal up to £10 million. So they are nearly always generous supporters of the DEC. And similarly, the Scottish government has a humanitarian emergency fund, which is a £1 million annual fund. And they also will support the DEC every time we launch an appeal. And per appeal, that's normally about £250,000. So they supported this current appeal. And interestingly, there are three aid organisations based in Scotland, which you probably know: SCIAF, Mercy Corps, and there's a lesser known one called the Mercy Aviation Fellowship, which also receive Scottish government money to do their humanitarian work when a DEC appeal is called. So we are really grateful both to the Scottish government and the UK government for their regular support for the DEC. It really is heartening that there is cross-party support for this work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Bad luck. But you've obviously generated a lot of interest. I'm terribly sorry about this, but we have a fairly detailed agenda, so I will limit it to 2 more questions, if you don't mind, and the questioners don't mind.
You've given us so much time, so yes, that's absolutely fine by me.
Jim Clopperty.
Yeah. Thanks, Provost, and thanks, Hugh, for your presentation. Hugh, obviously, the DEC get into some of the most remote places and deliver aid to people who need it. I'm just wondering about, we're celebrating the West, the COVID vaccine, and I'm just wondering, what is the delivery is it going to be yourselves that are going to be a delivery mechanism for the COVID vaccine to some of these outlying places? It might be an unfair question for you, Hugh, but obviously as we're celebrating here, it must be on everybody's minds in these areas.
Yes. It tends to be that DEC members are not really the agencies that deliver this kind of support. You'll be aware that the UN and there are many other agencies are involved, and obviously the World Health Organization. So they're in the lead. I mean, I used to work for UNICEF for a while, and obviously they do a huge number of vaccination programs across the world, and they would probably be heavily involved. So I don't think the DEC will be, or all the membership, maybe 1 or 2 members may be supporting in some way, but will not be a lead organization in delivering the vaccine. But obviously we will provide the ongoing support around it. But in terms of the politics of the vaccine, we can probably duck that one.
Thank you again, Hugh. Stephen.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Hugh, for your presentation. I was just going to pick up the question you asked around how you can maybe engage with the wider local government family in Scotland. And the best way is through COSLA, the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities. There's a monthly meeting, tends to be last Friday of the month, of council leaders. And I think that's the best way to engage, is maybe ask for a presentation at that meeting. So you would contact probably the President, Councillor Alison Everson, and ask if you could make a presentation. There'll be a meeting towards the end of January, which might fit in with the launch of your next appeal.
Well, that would be fantastic. Maybe I can follow up afterwards and check with you or your colleagues what's the best way to land that. But that would be very useful, particularly at that time. And as I say, following your lead, it would be fantastic if we could infuse other organisations, other councils across Scotland. Given the backdrop, we obviously realise the challenges here at home, and I'll leave that to you now and all your other business. But to keep that sort of global citizenship support across Scotland at this time is hugely important. So I thank you again for your time this afternoon, and I wish you well for the rest of your meeting, and in fact the rest of the year.
Thank you, Hugh. we are indebted to you for coming here today. It has, as you know, it's generated a lot of interest and discussion. I must apologise if you feel as if you've been hurried or your presentation has been curtailed in any way. No, you don't, right? Okay, that's great, Hugh. So we'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you, Hugh.
Yeah, thanks once again all, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. All the best for now.
Thanks, guys.
Bye then, Hugh.
Item 3 is the minutes of meetings of the Inverclyde Council, committees, subcommittees and boards. The first one is the Inverclyde Council, Thursday the 24th of September 2020. I declare this is a true record. Page 167, 168, 169, 170, 171, 172, 173 and 174. The next item is the Planning Board, 7th of October 2020. David.
I declare this to be a true.
Thank you, David. Page 175, 176 and page 177. The Human Resources Appeals Board, Thursday, 8th of October 2020. Jim.
I declare this a true record.
Page 178. The General Purpose Board, 14th of October 2020. Gerard.
I move the minutes of the General Purposes Board for the 14th of October as a true record, subject to the correction of paragraph 425 of the appendix to state the correct name of the applicant, which will be specified by Mr. Malone at consideration of item 18. Business in the appendix.
Thank you, Gerard. Page 179. The Audit Committee, 18th of October 2020, Channel.
Provost, I move this as a true and accurate record. Thank you.
Thank you, Channel. Page 180, page 181, and the Environment Regeneration Committee, 21st of October 2020. Michael.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Page 182 and 183. The Health and Social Care Committee, Thursday, the 22nd of October 2020. Robert. Page 184, 185, 186 and 187. The Inverclyde Council, 29th of October 2020. I declare that this is a true record. Page 183. And sorry, I've got that wrong. Please, Ed. It's page 188 and page 189. Environment Regeneration Committee, 29th of October 2020. Michael.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Page 190, page 191, page 192, page 193, page 194, page 195, and page 196. The Education and Communities Committee, 3rd of November 2020. Jim.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Page 197, 198, 199, 200, 201, 202, and 203. The General Purposes Board, 11th of November 2020. Gerard.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Page 204 and page 205. Policy and Resources Committee, 17th of November 2020. Stephen.
I move the minutes as a true record, Provost.
Page 206, 207, 208, 209, 210, 211, and 212. The Local Police and Fire Scrutiny Committee, 19th November 2020. Tommy.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Page 213, page 214, and page 215. The Environment and Regeneration Committee, 24th of November 2020.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Page 216. Okay. Planning Board, 2nd of December 2020. David.
I move this as a true record, Provost.
Page 217 and page 218. Okay. So we've made our way thus far to agenda item number 4. We've a notice of a motion by Councillor Jackson. It concerns the Strathclyde Pension Fund. Colin, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Provost. Provost, this motion comes in 2 parts. Firstly, I'll talk about the investment, then I'll talk on the second about the governance, which I'll come on to. The Strathclyde Pension Fund, as we know, is one of the largest investment funds in the UK and is worth £24 billion. The fund has investments in over 35 countries worldwide, supporting foreign manufacturing, infrastructure and education programmes. Strathclyde Pension Fund have informed us they have no current or future plans to invest directly or indirectly in Inverclyde. This motion requests that Strathclyde Pension Fund review the current and future investment strategy and invest more in local initiatives to help deliver the wider economic benefits for Inverclyde. The second part, Provost, of governance. Inverclyde Council has no direct representation on the Pension Fund Committee. I've both seen where and how the fund is invested. More local representation can help steer more investment in Inverclyde, but there's also the ethical issue around investment. Now, I recognise, Provost, the pension fund needs to provide a return on members' investments, but the Strathclyde Pension Fund invests in firms that use child slave labour. It invests in the nuclear arms industry and it invests in carbon-producing fossil fuels. We need an investment portfolio that provides a financial return for pension investors, but also meets the more ethical, social, environmental benefits. Inverclyde Council need to be at the table and decide where and what our members' funds are invested in. Therefore, the motion asks that the Council agrees to, firstly, lobby Strathclyde Pension Fund to a proper direct local investment strategy, one that invests in local and regional economies where the fund's members live and work, and invests in projects that provide a financial return to the fund while delivering wider economic and social benefits for the communities across the fund's area. Secondly, it requests a review of the fund's governance with the aim of ensuring that every local authority within the fund's region has into the operation of the fund. And thirdly, work with other local authorities, non-local authority employers and trade unions across Strathclyde Pension Fund area to support points 1 and 2. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks, Colin. And I understand that Jim is going to second the motion. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Provost, and thanks, Colin, for moving this. I think we've got to be sure that what we're asking for here, what we're asking for is the Strathclyde Pension Fund, which is one of the most successful pension funds in the UK, and one that we're all invested of, all our employees and us as members. We wish to make sure that the pension fund itself is used to the benefit of the people of the west of Scotland, Strathclyde, what it's meant to be looking after. Now, we know that pension fund trustees have got a responsibility, first and foremost, to the members of the pension fund. That's what a trustee is there to do. We know as well that the pension fund have invested in Inverclyde. We know that the Gallagher development up until Glasgow was funded by the Strathclyde Regional Pension Fund. We do believe more can be done. And I think in these days when we're looking at investment, I think one of the things we'd be calling for is when we're trying our best to get investment into Inverclyde and to Strathclyde, that the pension fund play a part in that. We are not talking about not having a return to the fund. We obviously want to ensure that the fund is stable and sustainable for the long term, because as Councillor Wilson keeps on saying about the amount of employer-employee contributions that go vested interest in it. So I think that's the first part with regard to the funding, and that is to ensure that we do have an economic benefit to Strathclyde Pension Fund within this area. The second part is about governance, and quite clearly, if we take ourselves, I mean, even in this council, between myself and Lynn, we've probably got about 50 years pensions experience between us. Now, there could be actuaries as councillors in other council schemes, in other council areas. I've got no doubt about that. But for us not to have a seat at that table, or at least some sort of way to input, to look at the experience that council members might have in other councils, seems to be a wee bit short-sighted. And I think that's where Colin's second part of his motion comes from. So I would hope that council members will take this in the way it's meant, and I hope that we get unanimous support from the council for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Colin. I understand I've got two or three people who wish to speak. Jim McElhaney.
Was I not next?
No.
Oh, yeah.
Jim McElhaney, David. You're after.
Oh, I do apologise.
Thanks, Provost. And having said that, I got onto it and on it. I sent down the application of possible to include a few other I think possibly complex to that. I mean, pretty much it could.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thank you. David?
Yeah, my apologies, Provost. Apologies, Jim. I'm supportive of this motion. If we look at the first part in terms of what the pension scheme does with its money, that's very, very much up to the people who sit in the board of it. I'm not surprised it's successful, because I've gone on about the 20% that we put in as employers, or then get put into everybody's pension fund every single month. It's a massive amount of money. I would like to address the second part of it. As representatives of councils, there are 8 Glasgow councillors on the board of the Strathclyde Pension Fund. The chair is a chap, Richard Bell. Richard Bell I know quite well from ET. He and I spent a lot of time on a selection process. He's the treasurer of Glasgow City Council. I quite respect that he knows what he's doing. But the committee is made up of 5, 1 Green, 1 Labour and 1 Conservative councillor, all from Glasgow. I don't think that is correct, and I quite agree with the motion with regards to that. We've seen what we can do as a small council on other outside bodies. We've seen the influence we've had in COSLA, influence, for instance, in SPT. We've had influence in lots of outside bodies by often just having the 1 member. And we've done very, very well. And I'm certainly very supportive of this motion by Colin Jackson and seconded by Jim Clockerton.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. Provost, I'm losing connectivity, so I'm hoping things will still continue to work here. I'm also completely in agreement with the motion that's been put forward by Councillor Jackson, Councillor Clockerty this afternoon as well. Completely agree with the pursuit of the principles that are outlined in the motion in relation to trying to get as much investment from the fund into what's happening in the west of Scotland, and I will be very interested to see how that's developed if we approve it this afternoon. I also very much support the call for wider representation within the governance structures of the fund. It seems very odd that there are so many local authorities represented within the fund, but they don't have a seat around the governance table for it, so I think that is something that should be remedied also. The question that I have is about next steps. If we approve the motion today, which I hope we do, what are the practical actions and taken by whom to take this forward? What can we do? What are the mechanisms to propose a change in governance of the fund? And what would be the next practical steps with regards to pursuing the community wealth building pursuits within the fund? Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a question there, and I'm going to direct either to Colin or to Jim, whoever wishes to answer it.
Martin, if I can just come in here, having spoken to other council group leaders, the motion will be, similar motions will be going in front of other councils, if not this year, next year, and it is by the wider community and by the trade union movement. I hope that doesn't scare Councillor Wilson, but hopefully this can move forward as part of the community wealth building through environment and regeneration. That would be how I would anticipate moving this forward. Elizabeth, I hope that answers your question.
Lynn, you have a question? Lynn, do you have a question?
Yeah, so similar to Elizabeth, my corrections kind of going to and fro. Yeah, just a question on. So you're talking about just from it. Jim's obviously mentioned that I have a huge number of years, them all, but of experience working for pension schemes. So actually the makeup of this pension fund is quite bizarre to me, because normally you would have a group of trustees, and they absolutely should be from Glasgow City Council as the administrator, so they'd be there just making sure that the fund is administered properly. But normally in a pension fund this size, you would have what we would call member reps as trustees. So that's actually members of the fund, who, if you're a member of that pension fund, then you can have a seat on the trustees table. So that is normally elected. They are elected by members. So each of us would get a vote every 3 years to put those reps on. So I would probably, when I'm passing this on to Glasgow City Council, maybe question that to say why is there isn't these 8 councillors on as members of, or are they on just as administration for Glasgow City Council as councillors of Glasgow City Council? Probably check that out. So I'm 100% support of the motion. I think the fund needs to be looked at. And I also hope that this is a start of a kind of wider, I know we've got a community wealth building strategy, but a start of actually expanding that a wee bit more and getting a wee bit more involved in the mythology of community wealth building. I actually attended a seminar which there were a rep from Clays there, and I think this is just a tip of the iceberg in terms of what we could be doing as a local authority. So I just hope that it's the start of bigger and better things as well. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Lynn. Natasha, do you have a question or a comment?
I had a question, if that's okay. Okay, my comment has actually been fairly reiterated by everybody else about making sure that we are represented a bit more diversely within the fund, and also making sure that there is some investment. So fully support this, and I won't take up any more time.
Thank you, Natasha. Do you agree with the recommendations?
Provost.
Sorry?
It's Jim McLeod.
Oh, Jim, yes. Jim,
Can I comment?
Apologies, Jim.
Yeah, my comment is essentially I agree with the motion. I think it certainly agree with also what other people have said so far. And, you know, we should have a say over the investments, the type of investments. And I've got some concerns. I know that Jim McElhinney's got some as well, and as well as some of the rest of us about, you know, what is actually invested in. So I think that's really important. And obviously having a seat at the table, you can certainly put in your concerns or raise concerns at that table. It would be great to see more investment in areas like Inverclyde and other council areas, rather than seeing a lot of investments always being in things that are abroad perhaps or whatever. We'd like to see more of that being done at home. Albeit we can't forget, I think since Strathclyde Pension Fund took over the retail park in Port Glasgow, I think they've done an exceedingly good job, because for long enough it really wasn't going anywhere until they took over. So I think we've got to give them praise for that. Regarding the present board constituting 8 councillors from Glasgow City, I mean, I don't know how and when that came about, because I remember Councillor James Robb. Now, James, I remember speaking to him, and James was a councillor, he was either in Western Bartonshire or Argyll and Bute, and he used to sit on the Strathclyde Pension Fund board at that time, because I remember, I had some concerns at that time which I spoke to him about, so I don't know when that changed, when it just became Glasgow councillors. Maybe we could try and find out that, why that change took place and when it did. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. I'll pose the same question as I posed earlier. Do we agree with the motion? Yes. Thank you. Item 5 is another notice of a motion. It's from Councillor Robertson, countersigned by Councillor Curley, and its focus is on the internal market. It's on page 5.
Thank you, Provost. And again, if you don't mind, I'm going to switch my video off to maximise my chances of staying with you. Thanks. So this is a motion that I'd like to bring before you, and it might seem as if I'm bringing the council motion equivalent of a local man lost at sea headline in the Aberdeen Press and Journal a couple of days after the Titanic went down. or the more recent Ayrshire Daily News version of South Ayrshire Golf Club owner loses 2020 US presidential election. Taking a huge national matter like the International Market Bill and bringing it before our small but perfectly formed council, asking that we write to the Prime Minister about concerns regarding the implications of the bill might seem futile. You know, what difference could we make? And it's a valid point, but the sphere of government that we operate in matters, and at every possible opportunity we should evidence that it does. We operate closest to the people in our communities who are the business owners and employees who might be affected directly by the implications of the Internal Market Bill. And while we have been lent their voices, we should use them to speak truth to other seats of power. Do I think that we can directly sway the Prime Minister with our letter? No, probably not. It doesn't mean, however, that he shouldn't receive it. Obviously, there's a time delay between putting forward motions and papers to council and what happens in the intervening period before we actually meet. So there was more to be concerned about in the wording of this bill several weeks ago when I first indicated that I wanted to bring the motion forward. In the intervening time, there have been amendments to the bill, and one particular clause of concern has been removed, which would have allowed the UK ministers to bypass other aspects of national government. The bill passed a third reading in the House of Lords yesterday, but Lord Callanan, who was progressing the bill, indicated that there was still a lot of work to be done between the UK government and the Scottish, Welsh and Northern Ireland governments. We in Scotland have withheld legislative consent, and Wales and Northern Ireland are both pending, so there's still much scope for communication to be made. And we can see this obviously from the content of the appendices in item 11 on our agenda today in terms of the EU withdrawal bill as well. The concerns that I've got about the principles of the bill are still live despite our time lag in this reaching us. They're all outlined in the motion that I've presented. I do fear that a centralisation of consumer and trading powers, which the removal of one clause is not fully eradicated from the bill, will be harmful. I do genuinely believe in subsidiarity, that things should happen at the most appropriate level of government, and what's in the Internal Market Bill isn't necessarily a step in the right direction in terms of that. Any retrograde step in terms of working across devolved governments and administrations is destructive, and crucially, all of this might impact here in Inverclyde, and that's really the reason why I'm bringing it forward. I think it does have an impact on our community. And that's why I wanted to bring this forward today.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. Thank you. Is Chris Curley, are you there, Chris? You
yeah, promised. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Elizabeth has explained it rather eloquently. I think the concern about this bill is it puts a horse and coaches right the way through the whole principle of subsidiarity, which, not to hark back, was obviously the general principle of the European Union, which we unfortunately have left. But am I Democrats? We have to work with what we've got at the moment. But I think we have to be, but that democratic principle, we do need to take account of the fact is that decisions should be made at the most appropriate level possible, and at the most local level possible. And the concern is that there seems the centralising agenda of the current UK government is basically driving, as it says, is driving what they call significant issues within how the UK is going to work within the next 5 years or so, which is going to be very critical as we move, unfortunately, out of the European Union. So it's just about trying to get a letter through, get a representation of Inverclyde Council and basically to say how can we to raise our concerns about this effectively what is an affront to democracy, an affront to the principle that democratic decisions should be made as local as possible, and hopefully make our case known to the most appropriate people in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I don't have any questions. Sorry, Graham. Graham, a question, comment, whatever. You decide. Just go.
Thank you very much, Provost. Previously circulated today would be an amendment from the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party group here at Inverclyde Council, and I hope members have that. I'm well aware that Mr Malone has a copy of it should you require further information. There's a number of things within the motion put forward by Councillor Robertson, I would certainly be happy to agree with, that we do have to ensure that decisions are taken in the appropriate levels of our governance structure, whether that be at UK, at Scotland, or here at Inverclyde. So my amendment comes to clarify the values that this this bill would actually bring, not just to the people of Scotland, but to the people of the UK. It's crucial that we protect the internal market bill with £50 billion a year of Scotland's economy relying on it. And that would be the first thing. They want to protect their jobs here in Scotland, not just here in Scotland, but also jobs throughout the UK, as we trade fairly and as we trade across the UK with an open and a standardised market bill. Both the movers of the motion have commented on democracy, and of course we're all Democrats here. Well, I hope we're all Democrats here on the call today. And what we want to do is we want to ensure that devolution works, and we want to ensure that items that are held at the UK government level also works. And that's why we have to make sure that this bill ensures that the information and the legislation that goes across the UK is fair and just. We had 1,775,045 people that they voted in 1997 to ensure that we had devolution, and we need to ensure that that devolution settlement works. But 2,001,926 people voted in 2014 to ensure that Scotland remained an integral part of the United Kingdom. So democracy is important to these people who turn to the ballot box, and this internal market bill ensures that the UK government, as decided of by the people of the UK, ensures that trade, industry can happen across the United Kingdom. Provost, I table the motion, I table the amendment that has been previously circulated.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much again. Your seconder.
Provost.
David.
For my case, for one main reason, we send billions every Europe. Once bureaucrats are finished with it, trickles back to Scotland. In the future, money for a certain period of time will come straight from London to Scotland, and in my view, it won't just trickle. We'll see a lot more money coming because London will be sending it straight up here, and we'll be able to use it here instead of putting it through Europe. So I'm very, very happy to second this motion.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Colin?
Thanks, Provost. The internal market bill means that the UK government is going to have to negotiate trade deals, Martin, and I'm kind of disappointed neither the motion nor the amendment have made any mention of the weakening or protection of workers' rights in either the motion or the amendment. I'm just wondering if the motion would like to comment on that, why they've made no reference to it within the motion or amendment.
Thanks, Colin. Graham, would you like to address
Provost, excuse me. That would be for summing up later, Provost.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Sorry for keeping you all waiting in suspense. Right, Jim McAleer.
Provost, Councillor Brooks, who must protect and support it, which seems odds his and the Prime Minister says that devil is a disaster. So the truth. So option refers to the money we're going to get back. That's not going to include the £150 million a week for the NHS.
no further questions on this. So, apologies again, Jim. Apologies again.
Okay. Provost, I've got real concerns about the internal market. It's obviously something that many of us in Scotland have got concerns about. A feeling of that many of the powers that we fought hard, long, and Civic Scotland took part in the 1990s. We had a vote in 1997, and it was a resounding vote for yes, yes in 1997, and we saw the Scottish Parliament reconvened in 1999. And over the years, we've fought long and hard to, as our devolved Parliament has continued to grow and prosper, and people and groups and parties have worked side by side in many areas in Scotland. So I think internal market is a real threat to devolution. I've got real concerns that it's going to water down the powers that we already have, and that more decisions will be taken by London. As Jim McElhenny said himself there, it hasn't been helped in the last week or two by comments from the Prime Minister, which were horrendous for anybody to make comments about devolution being a disaster in Scotland. I don't know what his own Conservative MSPs must think about that, because they've been part of the devolved Parliament for 20 odd years. So, and for Councillor Wilson made comment about money going to EU and it trickling back. We could say the same thing about Scotland. Scotland pays many more billions of pounds each year to London Exchequer than what we actually get back. So, and we can go back previous years, and there's a record of that happening. So, I've got great concerns in the internal market, and I fully support my colleague Liz Robertson's motion. Liz Robertson, supported by Chris Curley's motion. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much, Jim. And I think we should all remember that the focus of this is on the internal market, as Elizabeth, I think, intended. There are no further questions as far as I gather, so I'm going to put myself in the hands of Jerry, right?
Thank you, Provost. Provost, at your discretion, you could allow Councillor Brooks to respond to Councillor Jackson's and Councillor McElhenny's points. Thereafter, Councillor Robertson has a right, in terms of standing orders, to sum up the debate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, okay. No, that's very helpful, Jared. Graham, do you want to answer the points?
Thanks very much, Provost. Yes, we have already agreed a common framework between all the devolved administrations and the UK government, and that has already organised a common framework for food, for safety, for hygiene. And Colin Jackson makes good points that we do not want to go into a race to the bottom on employment legislation, and I've got every confidence that the UK government will ensure that we protect the workers of the UK as the bill takes hold and as we move forward as an independent nation. It's great to know in comments that the Scottish Farmers Union of Scotland are backing it, the Scottish Environmental Link is backing it, and we've heard recently, when the bill was presented, about how the strength that the bill brings to the Baxter's food groups. So there's very positive things in there, and we ensure that things going forward must go forward together as the four devolved administrations and the UK government make the best for the people of the United Kingdom.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Graham. Elizabeth, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Provost. Actually, just to go firstly to Councillor Jackson's point, I would be quite happy to amend my second point in 1.2, so 1.22, that all powers and duties within the Internal Market Bill must address the key issues of workers' rights, consumer and trading protections. I'm quite happy to add that. He's absolutely right to make that point. I don't have the same confidence that Councillor Brooks and Councillor Wilson have in terms of the promises that are made at a UK level and how they translate into what happens for the benefit of or not of Scotland. And really the purpose of me bringing this motion is that I am here to do what's right for Inverclyde. I'm here to do that particular job, and I just feel that we need to put a marker down that any threat to devolution isn't beneficial, it's not right, and that we really should be protecting as much as we can moving forward. And I don't have the same confidence that everything working together is going to be for the benefit of the people of Inverclyde. Lord Callanan yesterday at the reading of the bill talked about there being a strong role for the devolved governments in the selection of the office for the internal market panel, and that seemed to be a huge concession in his part. And again, it just filled me with dread. You know, that if that's seen as a big, a big olive branch offering, then that's not the scale of the kind of involvement that I think that we should have as a government in how this bill actually progresses forward. So that's my summing up in response to the comments that have been made across the table today. Provost, thank you very much for allowing me to bring this to Council today.
Provost, there is a point of order from Councillor McCabe. Also, I would require Councillor Curley to agree with the amendment of the inclusion of the words workers' rights in point 22 of the primary motion.
Chris, are you there? Councillor Curley.
Thank you, Martin. Issues with IT, as I think a lot of people are having today. Yes, I'm happy to, add consent to the additional wording in 2.2.
Right. Okay, thank you very much, Chris. Stephen.
Yeah, Provost, I hesitate to become a spoil sport, and much as I am enjoying the political banter in the chat box, it really isn't appropriate in the middle of a formal council meeting. So I would ask that you ask members to desist from that political banter in the chat box.
Stephen, I'm unaware of it because my chat box only gives me a list of those present. It's a nice chat box, but I can't see any of the banter. Let's see. Yes, when you don't get involved in USA politics, we receive UK. We receive that. Yes, I can understand that. You know, we must focus on the motion in hand. We've really got to. This isn't an arena for petty politics. No, even grand politics, even decisive politics. We must focus on the issue in hand. Right, Gerard, I'll take instructions.
Thank you, Provost. My advice to you, of course, Provost, is that we have a motion from Councillor Robertson, seconded by Councillor Curley, thus amended from the page 5 of the principal papers to include the words workers' rights, key issues of workers' rights, consumer and trading protection. We have an amendment proposed by Councillor Brooks and seconded by Councillor Wilson. Provost, I have to ask, would you wish me, Provost, to read out Councillor Brooks' amendment? Would members find that helpful? Would you find it helpful if I were to read that out?
I think I would find it helpful, Gerard. You know, I may have lost.
Gerard, I certainly would find it helpful.
Yes, exactly. We want to know what we're voting on. Please, Gerard, just read it out.
Provost, I will comply with your request, which is the amendment from Councillors Brooks and Wilson are as follows. That this council writes to the Prime Minister and the First Minister of Scotland to express its views in the strongest terms that the internal market bill must be modified, must be passed and seek royal assent in order to protect our economy, Scottish jobs and livelihoods. 2, outlining that Scotland's government must observe the rule of law in all of the UK's international obligations and referendums. 3, that all powers and duties within the internal market bill must address the key issues of consumer and trading protection, and responsibilities for these should be maintained at the most suitable local levels. And 3, that any such legislation must respect in full the status and responsibilities of the UK's devolved administrations and sustain established and effective ways of working together. Is that correct, Councillor Brooks? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you wish me to add workers' rights at all to any element of that either?
Yes, I'm happy for that to be added, and I'm sure Councillor Wilson will support me.
I will add workers' rights in the same part of the paragraph, key issues of workers' rights, consumer and trading standards. Provost, that is the motion and that is the amendment. Is that acceptable to you, Provost?
Yes, of course, yeah.
I will therefore proceed with the vote, Provost. I will do the roll call vote and I will ask members motion or amendment. The motion is from Councillor Robertson. The amendment is from Councillor Brooks. Councillor Alfeld, motion or amendment?
Motion. Sorry, did you get that? Motion.
Motion. Thank you, Councillor Alfeld. Provost, I will come to you at the end of the voting. Councillor Brooks?
Amendment.
Councillor Clockerty?
Motion.
Councillor Crowder?
Motion.
Councillor Curley?
Motion.
Councillor Dorian?
You're mute, Jerry.
Councillor Dorian?
Motion.
Thank you, Councillor Dorian. Motion. Councillor Jackson?
Motion.
Councillor MacLeod?
Motion.
Councillor McCabe?
Despite some of the nonsense spoken by some supporters of the motion, I'll vote for the motion.
Councillor McCormick?
Motion.
Councillor McElhenney, Councillor Chris McElhenney?
Point out the comment in the chat to say he's losing connection. Are you voting for the motion?
Well, I cannot accept that at this stage, I'm afraid, Councillor McElhenney. I cannot take up. Councillor McElhenney says motion. Thank you. Councillor Jim McElhenney?
Motion.
Councillor McKenzie?
Motion.
Councillor McVeigh?
Motion.
Councillor Moran? Motion, Councillor Moran?
Yes, motion.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy?
Motion.
Councillor Nelson?
Motion.
Councillor Quinn?
Motion.
Councillor Rebecca?
Motion. Jerry, there's something breaking the sound up at times, and I don't know if it's when Jim McLeod comes in with the phone and we hear a hard, sort of rash noise through it. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Beckett. The item has been reported and the ICT service manager is investigating that acoustic problem. Thank you. Councillor Robertson?
Motion.
And Councillor Wilson?
Motion. Oh, no, sorry. Amendment. I do apologise.
And Provost?
Motion.
Provost, I declare that there are 20 votes for the motion. There are two votes for the amendment. I declare the motion carried.
Provost, Jared, I see Councillor Chris McElhenney made comment. You did pick up his vote?
I did, Provost. I can confirm to the Chief Exec that I took Councillor Chris McElhenney's vote, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just say, Jared, the problem's happening when Jim isn't speaking. I've come out 3 times now and had to go back in again.
Provost, I can report that the acoustic difficulties have already been reported by Mrs Sweeney, and that Mr MacDonald is investigating this and doing a check on that just now.
Gerard, can I just let you know that my phone is silent? I've actually got it on mute.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod.
Right. Item number 7 is the Chief's annual report.
It's item number 6, please.
No,
I can hear you, Provost, but you are certainly breaking up a little bit.
Title from the leader of the minority groups to the leader of
Provost, if I may contribute, the reason I suggest this is that your introduction there broke a little bit more than before. So, Provost, if I could perhaps just assist yourself and the other members. I'm responding in this report to the members' request that I bring this back. The Council's role is not to appoint the leader of the minority groups. If that were the case, then administration members and those members who might from time to time be aligned with the administration would have a say in the nomination and appointment of the opposition leader. And I'm quite aware that this council doesn't like the terminology opposition leader. And it wouldn't make sense for the administration or aligned parties to do that. The purpose of the statutory meeting is to receive the notification from the non-administration parties as to who is their leader, always accepting that there might not be an alignment of those non-administration parties. So the wording of the reports which you've introduced, Provost, in terms of leader of minority groups, as you say, it's a semantics element, but perhaps goes a little bit further than that, is that we term it as a leader of the largest minority groups, and that is reflecting the position in terms of the largest non-administration party. So this report clarifies for elected members at their request that the leader of the minority groups be the leader of the largest non-administration political party, and that leader is chosen by a vote of the largest non-administration party, and the title of that position will be the leader of the largest minority group, and we will amend our reports accordingly, Provost. I hope that helps.
interest in
Provost, yeah, I agree. It's actually the one that talked last point. We'll have a quite right. So I would like to put in to make the leader of the largest non-administration group. The reason why I say that is that the moment the current administration does just not in a
Provost, do we have a seconder for Councillor McElhaney's motion if Councillor McElhaney has finished his contribution?
Jim, do you have a seconder for this?
Yes, I'll second that.
I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear. It was breaking up.
Provost, if I may. Provost, I can assist if you wish.
Yes.
To assist Councillor Wilson, Councillor McElhaney's motion, seconded by Councillor Crowther, is to change the proposal in the report and to substitute the wording largest non-administration group. That's instead of the minority group, largest non-administration group.
No, I would be happy with that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can, Councillor Wilson. I believe all the other members can too.
Right. I'm happy with that.
Provost, I'm very much in the hands of the elected members at this point.
I want to
Yeah, Provost. Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I just wanted to thank Jim for bringing that forward because that was the comment that I had. So thank you for the recognition that we're not all political parties, we're groupings. So I absolutely support the amendment.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to withdraw my comment. It's not helpful to this conversation. Thanks, Provost.
Okay, that's fine.
Is it the Wi-Fi that where?
I don't know. Alan said he can't see.
Aubrey, you are live at present and unmute. If I can say, Provost, to the members, Mrs. Sweeney has asked for assistance from our ICT colleagues and has asked the ICT service manager to join the meeting. He is presently monitoring the meeting analysis, the monitoring statistics. There's nothing adverse showing up that he can detect, and I'm hopeful that if Mr. McDonald can join us at Diane's request, Mrs. Sweeney's request, it may shed some further light on this. I'm sorry for this.
Don't beat yourself up, Gerard. It just doesn't work properly.
Jerry, I've notifications from Councillor McVeigh that he has lost all connection and can't get back in.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. We've noted that.
If you have a comment to make, could you in the chat? Very difficult and quite confusing. And I'm an old man. I would ask Jim later on, John Crowther.
That's been thank you. I'm more
Okay. Okie doke. And we can keep an eye on the chat here.
Provost, I believe we're seeking assistance for the quite distinct acoustic problems that we're having just now. I'm aware that Councillor Crowther has made a proposal, but I genuinely could not hear if that was agreeing with Councillor McElhenny's proposal or making a different proposal. Perhaps Councillor Crowther could confirm.
Okay, it's basically just confirming what Councillor McElhenny had said. I don't know if anyone can hear me. Or not.
Yes, I can hear you, John. I can hear you.
Just to confirm what.
To confirm, and you are in complete agreement with Jim. Yeah. That's the status quo, right? Yeah. Okay, we've got that. Stephen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Provost, I'm pleased to have facilitated this particular agreement among the non-administration groups, and I'm pleased that we seem to have consensus. So can we agree it and move on?
Councillor McCabe's suggestion is that we agree the amendment and move on.
Provost, I will note. Provost, yeah. Absolutely. Provost, I will note that the wording is to be leader of the largest non-administration group, and we will amend our records accordingly, Provost. Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologies, Provost. See, just before we continue, if people turn their cameras off, that would free up some bandwidth, which may stop the audio issues. It's just a suggestion. It's worked in other meetings I've been in.
Well, I'm looking for the officers' advice here, because they devised the system, so they should know most about it.
Provost, I will require to get some assistance from Mrs. Sweeney and Mrs. McGee.
Yeah.
Of what's happening with our ICT colleagues joining the meeting. They might be able to assist. And I'm also conscious from the live broadcasting that we overheard there that the Chief Executive and Mr. Puckrin are trying to sort things out as well. They might well have rejoined the meeting. I think Councillor Murphy's suggestion is a good suggestion. It has worked occasionally in the past. I don't know if Mrs. Sweeney can possibly signal that she's had an update or anything like that just yet. Thank you, Provost.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I couldn't invite Alan McDonald to the meeting for some reason. It's not letting me do it. I have phoned him. He said that he is running diagnostic checks and that all appears to be well at his end. I think it would have helped if we could have invited him to the meeting to see exactly what we're talking about.
Not on this.
Okay.
Could someone give me some guidance here? Are we all going to adopt Natasha's suggestion?
Provost, I would recommend that if members are, if it is acceptable, to yes, please accept that suggestion to close down the video. And if we get any change in that, myself or Mrs. Sweeney will advise you directly, Provost, and that way we might be able to recommence the meeting and continue with business.
Right.
If that satisfies you, Provost.
Okay. Right. I'll stop the video for myself now. I'm still on it. I'm on it again. Stop video. Now, please refresh my memory. We have completed 6 items of the 18. And we are now proceeding with item 7. Is that correct?
It's Provost. Item 7, Ms. McAleese and the Chief Social Work Officer report.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thanks, Jared. Well, we've just had quite a detailed and very informative all-members briefing on the work of Sharon's service. For my own part, I'm more than happy with what the service has accomplished. for our more vulnerable citizens. And I commend the service on their day-to-day work and their quite exceptional dedication during this year, which has been so different from any other year. I think, do we agree the report?
Agreed.
There are other questions on it.
Agreed.
I agree with you, Provost. It's Chana.
Agreed.
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 Councillor Moran, agreed.
Graham Brooks. Graham, did you have something? Did you have a question?
No, Provost. I was agreeing to the motion just to make it fast and simple.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much. That's very reassuring. Thank you, Graham. You can come again. Right. So we have agreed item 7. We now excuse me while I turn the pages. This is a financial strategy item. Agenda item number 8 is a financial strategy 2020 to 2030. It's an update. Alan, do you want to say anything about it?
Thank you, Provost. This is a 6-monthly revision, which is heavily shaped by the financial impact of COVID. The report is written in advance of the Chancellor's spending announcement of last week, but there wasn't a significant change in the figures and the impact and the assessment by the OBR. The usual 3 scenarios for the next 3 years are included in the tables 4A, B and C, with funding gaps of £4 to £27 million, depending on whether you're a glass half full or glass half empty person. And the covering report provides updates on all the funding models, whilst Appendix 1 to 3 horizon scans for future issues. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Alan. Right, I see. Right. I was going to call Elizabeth, but I noticed in the chat function, you how versatile I am, that her question has been already addressed. Do we agree the report?
Agree.
Agreed. Agreed.
Agree.
Agreed, Councillor Dorian.
Agreed.
Councillor Moran agrees.
Thanks. Agreement is agreement. Okay. You don't get it often, but agreement is great. Now move on to agenda item number 9, the 2021 to 23 revenue report, and I think 5.2 is a critical part of the report. Alan, do you have anything to say about this?
Thank you again, Provost. I think given the scale of this, if members can bear with me just for a minute. Members agreed at the Policy and Resources Committee that a report on the budget be presented to the Council today in order to make a number of decisions prior to Christmas and to provide certainty to the community regarding service levels and the workforce regarding job security for the 21-22 financial year. Members should note that given the significant uncertainties highlighted in the report, it is not recommended that they formally agree council tax or formally agree the 2021-22 budget today, and the report recommends that council tax is approved at the next scheduled meeting of the council on the 18th of February. The report also contains a number of appendices, which includes budget pressures, proposed adjustments and savings, the use of reserves, and the reductions to current reserves in the capital programme to fund the £16.2 million investment referred to in Appendix 5. It's also important that members note the Chief Financial Officer's advice regarding the maximum funding deficit as at March 2022 to be passed to the new council. This advice is to ensure that the council's service delivery and finances are sustainable in the medium term. Based on the figures in this report, this would require the current estimated funding gap of £7 million in Appendix 4 to be reduced by £3 million over the next 12 months. And again, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'm aware that members have been circulated with amended recommendations prior to the meeting.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Alan. Very succinct, but I think you covered everything there. Ronnie wishes to speak, or has a question or a comment. Ronnie.
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. Appreciate that. With regard to recommendation 3.3, relating to Appendix 5, page 3, I'm unable to support this recommendation, which relates to the right back of £100,000 from the Gourock Regeneration Forum. One of the reasons for the recommendation is that these funds are unallocated. Now, while this is true currently, it's not been possible for us to formulate our proposals due to the restrictions of the pandemic. However, some background to this and clarity on this proposal. At a previous meeting to discuss the right back proposals, Councillor Curley suggested that consultants should be engaged to compile feasibility studies to make assessments and proposals to all three regen forums. And that was to clearly identify areas which we should concentrate on in terms of fulfilling our regeneration remits. I advised Chris that we in the Gourock Regen Forum had already done so some 18 months ago, and we were working to carry out those recommendations. To achieve this, we had established a specific subgroup and a business support group, and their work and recommendations were a major reason for not supporting a right back. Despite this, and probably rather bizarrely in my book anyway, Chris voted to support the right back of 100,000 from the Gourock Regeneration Forum. To consider some other major points, Provost, Jim Clockerty, Jim Chair of the Gourock Regen Forum, indicated that they also were happy to write back £500,000 plus, basically because there were no allocated funds against projects in Greenock. And like Chris, Jim supported the write back of the Gourock funding, regardless of being unaware of the status of our proposed development affairs. There's been no discussion and no consultation on any of this. And I believe that all three forums basically know their business best, and I personally would never dream of voting against any recommendation relating to another forum. And if Jim in Greenock and Drew in Port Glasgow had requested support to retain all or some of their individual funding, then I would have supported them. It can't be right that members, without being aware of any details or plans, blindly vote to overrule us. I mean, how can that be fair and how can that be equitable? Previously, mention was made that the right backs would provide a sum of circa £1 million, which would be added to the £5 million already committed to the Jobs Recovery Plan. Provost, creating jobs and opportunities is in my DNA. And given that the remit of our Regeneration Forum is to promote the economic regeneration of our towns, the Gourock Regen Forums are focused primarily on achieving this. The work being done and developed locally includes the creation of an outdoor education centre in Gourock Park for use by local nurseries and primary children, the development of decaying sports facilities, and to this end we've been discussing with national and local sports bodies, including the Judy Murray Foundation. We have engaged with the private sector to discuss the consultant recommendations relating to developing Woodland Trails, a woodland play area, basically creating a fully accessible park. And on the business side, we are keen to create incubation hubs in empty privately owned local properties, hubs where local entrepreneurs and tradespeople can practice and develop their businesses in a risk-free environment. Initiatives endorsed recently by the Scottish Government to encourage the creation of employment opportunities, and we believe that our £100,000 would do that locally. Our representatives in Gourock have engaged with major funders such as the Robertson Trust, Green Space Initiatives and other government schemes. In many cases, match funding is a prerequisite of making successful bid applications. So not only would the right back of 100,000 potentially negatively affect this, it would also negatively affect our ability to create jobs and employment opportunities, which is basically what we're all about. It's not my business to comment on activities of other forums. However, I would most certainly support the recommendation of the respective chairs. After all, they know their own business best. And it follows then that I do not expect other members to support recommendations affecting our forum. Provost, basically, I find it difficult to understand how other members who have no direct involvement can blindly vote to write back the Gurut regeneration funding when they have not had the courtesy to ask how both myself and our members felt about it. Basically, no consultation, no discussion. We really don't care about where you are or what initiatives you have in the pipeline. We're going to force you to give it back. Provost, some of this funding right back, it was to assist creating the new position of a town centre manager who will have a responsibility remit which will be 90% Greenock, as it should be. This being the case, it makes sense for the funding for this post to come from the Greenock Forum, given that we in Gurut will apparently benefit of about 5% of the new manager's time. Then we will happily recommend to our members that we should contribute 5% of the person's salary. In conclusion, Provost, and I suppose you'll be glad about that, as far as the Regeneration Forum is concerned in Gurut, we're extremely fortunate. We have a dedicated, switched on, enthusiastic, committed group who have vast experience in the business world. They're totally solid and they're sold in the aspirations we have for our town, and more importantly, have worked and are working to achieve our common goals. Basically, I marvel at their dedication and commitment. Basically, every meeting we all attend nowadays as councillors, we refer to community empowerment, community support, encouragement to engage with communities to develop projects. Well, we have this on the Gurut Forum. Representatives from Gurut Community Council, traders, private sector, development consultants, churches, schools together, the sports community, young people, and members of the public. If this right back goes through today on the votes of other elected members, then I consider it to be shameful. In many respects, it's penalising us for the foresight, industry, and commitment of our members and volunteers. Does anyone honestly think that it's fair for me to go to the members to say, thanks for your work and commitment, unfortunately have to append all your work and put it on the back burner. Come back in a couple of years and we'll pick it up again. Not for me, Provost. So what I would like to do today is to add a statement to 3.3. And that statement should read, write-backs of each individual town centre funding to be separately approved by each forum in discussion with forum members prior to consideration being given to any write-backs. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. Quite a lot to digest there, but it's an addendum to 3.3 that you're proposing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you want to involve the various forums?
I want to involve, sorry?
You wanted to involve the various regeneration forums?
I do, yes, I do.
That correct?
I want all the regeneration forums to make their own decisions, basically.
To make their own decisions with
regard to right back.
The council money, with the from the revenue budget, the money from the revenue budget. Okay, thanks. Gerard, Mr. Malone.
Provost, I'm here.
Yes. Now, I'm not quite. Is that an amendment?
It might be, Provost, if I can perhaps help on this occasion.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Councillor McCabe is seeking to move the budget report and the recommendations that are there. The circulated recommendations 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4. As I understand it, Councillor Alfeld is wanting to make an addendum. First of all, Councillor McCabe will confirm that a seconder is needed for his motion, and Councillor Alfield will need to confirm that a seconder is required for his proposal. And it might be agreed, and if it's not agreed, then it will have to go to a vote in respect of that particular item. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Chair. So, to revert to you, Ronnie, do you have a seconder for your motion?
Yeah, Councillor Quinn, I believe, is going to second.
Right. Lynn.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yeah, I agree that I second this motion. There's probably I mean, I think Ronnie's covered most of it. I think it's just to echo some of the points that he had said. You know, about the money being written back because it's residual unallocated funds. These are definitely not residual unallocated funds. They are a plan in the making. And we're actually having a discussion on how we can get grant funding to make this money go further. So our plan, in fact, our plan for the park was actually agreed on the 14th of June 2019 by our Bureau of Regeneration Forum. That was after council officers came with a consultant's report. So as we say, well, this has been 18 months in the making. You know, so our project is just actually in line with the previous agenda item on page 113. It mentions one of our priorities under the law, which is Inverclyde's environment, cultural heritage will be protected and enhanced, a better place for Inverclyde residents and an attractive place to live, work and visit. So actually, I think that this project demonstrates that fully. Just one last point to make is I actually met reps from the Judy Murray Foundation this morning, and they have fantastic plans for our tennis courts within the park. They were talking about how that we are investing heavily in an indoor tennis facility. But where is the employees coming from? Where are these sports leaders coming from? They're hoping to come to our park and actually create sports leaders that can actually have employment within our tennis facility. So I absolutely support Councillor Alfield's motion. I think we should give back control to our regeneration forums and give back control of the park to our communities who 100% support this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Gerard.
Provost, are there any other contributions, any other amendments or any other motions?
Yes, there are a number of contributions. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 contributions, and we've got to ask Jim if on the phone.
Provost, I've already indicated to you in the chat, and I indicated to you privately that I was intended to move the recommendations in the report. I think Ronnie got in before me and has moved a motion. And I think it's now appropriate that I move my motion.
Right. Okay, on you go, Stephen.
Thanks, Provost. I have to say before I do move my motion, I think some of the comments that Ronnie made were wholly inappropriate. He divulged private discussions that were taking place within the members' budget working group on a Chatham House rules basis. And he absolutely should not have divulged that. There was no vote at the members' budget working group, no vote whatsoever. The only vote will be here today. And so it wasn't a matter of anybody voting for any proposals. We are trying to achieve consensus at the members' budget working group, and we tried hard to achieve consensus. We were able to get most people to sign up to recommendations which were circulated earlier today. And I understand the concerns that there are around the regeneration funding, and I'll address that in a minute. But I just think Ronnie should reflect on the fact that he should not have been divulging private discussions that took place. So I'm going to move the amended recommendations that were circulated earlier, Provost, and these were agreed by the majority of the groups at the members' budget working group this afternoon. And I don't think any of us anticipated a year ago that we'd be sitting here online this afternoon or this evening, nearly, discussing our next budget against the backdrop of a health crisis and an economic crisis. So these are hugely challenging times. And as far as the administration is concerned, and I think the majority of the council, the priorities at this point in time must be to protect jobs and services as best we can, which these jobs and services are important for our local communities, and also supporting directly the local economy through our jobs recovery plan. And that does require hard choices and difficult decisions. It means some savings will be needed, although we're going to have to try to keep them to a minimum. It does mean we're going to have to prioritise the use of reserves and capital projects, and indeed reprioritise the use of reserves. And we have to consider a council tax rise, a modest council tax rise albeit. And I'm pleased that we have achieved agreement of the majority of the members of the Budget Working Group and indeed the Council for the recommendations before us today. And I can understand the concerns of members of the independent group about the right back of the regeneration funding. I have to say that it was Labour councillors in the Labour administration who consistently over the years, as part of our budget proposals, have put forward additional funding for town centres. I don't really recall too many occasions when others put forward proposals for town centres. So clearly we believe that town centres and indeed village centres are critically important. But at this point in time, we see that the best impact we can have on the local economy and the best impact we can have on families is to create jobs through the job recovery plan. So the right back is for that central purpose. But as is alluded to in the report, mentioned in the report, we've got the capital programme to look at. Potentially some funding could be identified for town centres. We don't know what the settlements we're going to get is going to be. Potentially there might be opportunities out of that for additional funding to be put into town centres. And also the Cabinet Secretary for Finance has indicated that one of the government's priorities in the Scottish Government's forthcoming budget will be town centres. So potentially we will see some funding coming to us for town centres. So town centres are not being forgot about. There's still a significant amount of money which will be invested in town centres over the coming years. But I would hope that we will be able to identify further funding in due course for town centres and village centres, because they are an absolute priority. But at this point in time, we have to make difficult choices, and that is one of the difficult choices we feel we need to make, which is to reprioritise the use of that reserve. So I move the amended recommendations circulated today, and that Councillor Clockhart is going to second me.
Jim. Okay, Provost, thank you, and thank you, Stephen. You know, I really don't know where to start with Councillor Alfield's amendment. Really, we're here as an Inverclyde Council. I can't remember all those years ago when we decided to commit the amount of money we did to Gourock and redoing the Gourock Town Centre. Millions and millions upon millions of pounds that we took a decision as Inverclyde because we recognised that Gourock was one of our priorities at that point in time. The same way as I'm hoping now that the people of Inverclyde and the councillors of Inverclyde recognise that Greenock Town Centre is now their priority. Anything that we do, we report back to the Environment and Regeneration Committee as the parent committee of the regeneration forums. So anything we do it, we get approval, we put it to Environment and Regeneration and get approval from that parent committee of the council. Ronnie went, I can't remember anything that I've seen at Environment and Regeneration Committee with regard to the Gourock Regeneration Committee. I can't remember anything that they've said there that has been up in front of any committee for funding in this council. So if you look at the Greenock one, we've had the crossing at Dalrymple Street up, we've had the fountain at Cathcart Street up, we've had various reports in the Babylon building up, all to the parent committee. Now, Councillor Alfield speaks about Gourock. everybody in this council cares deeply about their own area. The Port Glasgow councillors, Drew, Chris, Stephen, David, Jim, Robert, all care about Port Glasgow. The Greenock councillors care about Greenock. And to sort of insinuate that somehow that Greenock councillors are the only ones that care about their area is extremely disingenuous to the rest of the members of this council. I had said before, we are in unprecedented times, and what we're doing here is a package of measures to try and alleviate the worst of this COVID crisis we're in. And therefore, what we've done is we've actually said, where can we actually take money from in order to redistribute it to what is needed most? And quite clearly, the package that we've put forward is where it's needed most. So I know I've been on a wee bit here and seconding that. I will not bother in my comments. I was going to comment again. I'm just extremely disappointed with Ronnie and Lynn. Extremely disappointed, because what they're trying to do is somehow put Port Glasgow against Greenock, Greenock against Gourock, and we are Inverclyde Council here. And I think we should all remember that. And we've got the best will to ensure that our priorities as a council is met, whether that's Port Glasgow, whether it's Greenock, whether it's Gourock, or whether it's our villages. And it's up to us to act as a council and not for individual areas at this point in time. So with that, I'm quite happy to second that motion. Thank you, Provost.
Mr. Provost, muted.
Provost, we have a motion, and we also have an amendment, and I'm aware, Provost, from the chat function that other members wish to comment too. Are you wishing to go through those comments just now, Provost?
Right, unmute. Hello, audible? Yeah.
Provost.
Right, okay. Then what I would ask them, if the members will call, if you could possibly keep your remarks as succinct as possible. Okay, Drew.
Thank you, Provost. I've listened to both sides of an argument there from Councillor Affeld and Councillor McCabe regarding what pot the money should be in for the town centre forums, whether it should be remain with the town centre forums or go to sort of job creation. And the three most important things facing this council just now are job creation, halting the population decline and revamping our town centres. And there's no doubt that these things are undoubtedly related. And it's right that each of our town centres should have a focus group, a forum to guide the way forward. And if I could refer to Port Glasgow, much has been done in the last 10 years, but much more remains to be pursued. We've got this roadmap that was brought forward from a charrette that was funded from the council, and very ambitious plans that will take us for the next 20, 30 years when the funding becomes available. We've also got two iconic structures going in the Coronation Park in the spring of next year. And don't think that you can put these two things in the park without an infrastructure going around about it. And that's going to cost money, more money than the Port Glasgow Forum has. I think it'd be appropriate to leave money with each of the forums, a token amount, and that's all it is. It's in at the moment. And when the projects come forward, they come to the council, the Regeneration Committee, and ask for more. And so I don't see what the argument is. Each of the forums are creating jobs in their own right. So to move the money to a job creation fund it doesn't really make much of a difference. I think the forums would enjoy having their own money. I think the people on the committees would sort of respect that a lot more. Anyway, that's what I've got to say on the town centres. But one other thing I would like to put forward as a proposal, which I would hope that Mr. Regards the Barsbury steps. And the Barsbury steps, there's £40,000 of funding was passed for it, and the proposal is that this be deferred for 3 or 4 years. And I think that it would be quite a folly to take this deferment at this time. This is a very important and historic artery into the town, the Barsbury steps, and it's in a very, very poor state of disrepair. And even some of the residents along various stages of the steps have taken it upon themselves to fix it themselves and to sort of decorate it as you go down the steps. But my main concern here is a health and safety concern. And £40,000 is not a lot of money compared to what the average insurance and claim would be for someone having a mishap. And I think at this time, having walked up the stairs the other day there, it'd be quite easy for any court to decide that this council has failed in its duty to make that a safe thoroughfare. So I think that the Barsbury steps should undoubtedly not have a deferment, but should be put on and proceeded with now. And I would hope that Mr. Malone would see fit to take that as a separate proposal.
Councillor Mackenzie, Provost, I would require a seconder for that in itself, Provost.
Yeah, Mr. Malone, I was saying Councillor Mackenzie's proposal there, and nothing further to add.
Provost, there may be other contributions. It may be the case that Councillor McCabe, as mover of the prime motion, might be able to accommodate Barsbury within that. If not, that matter would go to a vote. I would suggest and advise, Provost, that the town centre right-backs and the Barsbury items are two distinct and separate items. They may be part of the appendix, but they are distinct from each other. They're not composite to that extent. And perhaps they would, I'm sorry, my recommendation would be that they should be voted on separately if it's going to a vote, Provost. Thank you.
Provost, just to clarify, obviously I've moved the recommendations, and the recommendations don't accommodate either of the amendments, so I won't be accepting either of the amendments.
Thank you, Provost, and that's noted.
Provost. Provost.
That's Councillor MacLeod trying to win.
Sorry, anybody right now? Don't know if I've...
Provost, there was a screen freeze for a substantial period of time there, I believe. I think everyone possibly experienced that.
Yeah.
Provost, we may have a resumption of our business, Provost. I'm just checking that you're available and that you can speak. Elected members, Chief Executive, if I could confirm from the chat function, I'm finding out that Mrs. Sweeney is trying to assist the Provost and Mrs. Carrick just now. I would ask the members of the Council to please bear with me, and we'll try to resume the conduct of the meeting. Thank you. I will stay on the line here. Rona, could you confirm to me, are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you very clearly.
Thank you. Members, officers, just to keep you advised, Mr. MacDonald, our IT colleagues are assisting the Provost just now, and the Chief Executive has just left me, and I think he's going to request the Provost to come to my room to conduct the meeting from my computer. So, as I say, for the second time, please bear with me just now. We're trying to resolve the situation.
Mr. Malone, does the procedure not call for an adjournment until this is sorted so that members can leave their desks without missing votes or content?
What we would do in a situation like that, Councillor Brooks, is to please let me take some advice from the Provost, who is trying to get back into the meeting. If it's going to be much longer, certainly yes. The protocol that we agreed did say that if it became insuperable difficulties, we would adjourn for certain periods of time, 10 minutes or 30 minutes if need be. I was just thinking before we did that, the Provost might be able to actually resume the meeting itself. Would you be able to bear with me under that basis just now?
Absolutely. I'm just saying it's your protocol or our protocol, and I'm just trying to suggest that we should be using the protocol when we lose the chair.
Absolutely, Councillor Brooks. The protocol would be that the remaining members would be able then to nominate the chair.
Point of order, please.
which would either be Councillors Alfield or Wilson, but at that stage, that's something that will only take place once we know that we can't resume the meeting. Councillor McElhenney is coming in with a point of order.
Can you just elaborate how we can actually still be holding a meeting if we don't have a chair?
At this point, there is just a pause in the meeting, and the Provost, I think, is actually trying to resume that right now. In fact, the Provost is with me just now. So the Provost will be resuming from this chair, okay, and the meeting will be resuming. Thank you. We're still at item 9, Provost, in terms of the revenue budget. We're going to require some assistance. What's happening?
You're on. Right. I'm on mute or...
No, you're okay.
No. Hello. Hi. I have returned.
Nice to see you, the new chief exec.
The IT department has rebooted me. Electric. So see where we are. Have we come to a decision to have a vote? No. Am I still looking for contributions?
Provost, we are on item 9, Provost.
Item 9.
And at present we have the motion from Councillor McCabe, seconded by Councillor Clockerty. We've got Councillor Alfeld suggesting that there be further consultation on the town centre right-backs added to item 3.3, and we have the separate item from Councillor Mackenzie and properly seconded that the Basbury be not deferred. I will be proposing to take those as individual votes, Provost, to determine the course of action, but I do not know if there's any further comments on the budget, Provost. There might be further comments.
There's a number of members waiting to comment, Provost.
Right, okay. As far as I can see, now you correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I can see, Natasha wishes to speak. Natasha.
Yes, thank you, Provost. My points have been covered in that we were talking about the fact that Councillor Alfield is... But my understanding was that each group's representative was meant to go back to their own individual meetings with their groups and actually discuss the members' budget working group papers with them. So I would have thought that would have happened at their meetings. So first of all, I think that should be noted. Another one is that if money has been allocated, then I would have thought that that couldn't have been taken away. But in regards to this exact item, I think that if there is a lot of controversy around this, that possibly it needs to be explored further. But I don't think that I could actually go with the amendment on this on Councillor Arfeld's indicated notions today, just purely because what we've got is before us and we're being asked to look at this. And I think that if we were to take the things that have been asked today and presume that in the future, what's to stop any future full council papers from having such amendments made when it's to do with the future budget? So I think we need to be really careful here of what we're actually doing and what's being proposed.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Now, I see a number of comments here. And I'm not sure if it's an indication that the member wishes to speak. Chris Curley, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Provost. I think my comments have probably changed since I originally put in my request to speak. Effectively, there's a few things here. First of all, I wish that Ronnie had brought his concerns more fully to the members' budget working group, but that's where we are at the moment. If we could address them there and come to a consensus, as we probably would like to try to do. I think generally there's obviously hard decisions going to have to be made in the budget, and this is definitely an interim. We see this as an interim paper to enable officers to progress the things that have been approved by by the relevant committees, PNR committees, for the job creation schemes, etc. So we see that as this is an interim. You can use the terms indicative interim, but this is something that shows us there's a way forward. It might not necessarily be forward we want to take at the end of the day, and certainly we will be considering all options we can to reduce any council tax rises, etc. As I'm sure other groups will be doing, but this is I think there's a way. This proposal here is a way forward to us to free up the officers, to enable them to to progress the spending proposals and develop the spending proposals that we've already approved. Now, when it comes to the individual items, we have obviously we've raised concerns. We have concerns, and we, for example, we as a group, we are still fully committed to the under-16 swimming proposals, etc. And we will take that forward within within the budget process going forward into February. Now, and also within the appropriate committee. Now, looking at some of the specific items, I think certainly when it comes to the Barsbury steps, it's Councillor Mackenzie's brought up. My understanding, and other officers might be able to help me here, is that these are actually adopted. These steps are actually adopted roads, so they should be prioritised within alongside every other single road and pavement in the council area. And if these steps warrant repair, then it should be done within the ramp. So that's the point of view for that. And as I say, I welcome Ronnie's suggestion that he's actually got all of these things in motion. But the thing is, these have not been presented through the committees, etc. And I echo Councillor Clockerty's views on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Christopher. Just for clarity, are you agreeing the recommendations or the recommendations as are? Can you hear?
We're not proposing any amendments. We'll voting as accordingly.
Okay. I wonder. I'm not quite sure of this. It was either a comment for the forum, or you want to make it an even wider comment. Lynn, do you have anything further to say or to ask, Lynn?
No, Provost, I think I was just making the point, although we were using Gurok as an example, because that is the forum that I'm involved with, but the amendment includes the 3 forums, so we're including the 3 towns. I think it was important to point that out, that this isn't just about Gurok, that's personal to us, but it actually includes 3 forums.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. I think that I think Mr. Malone will now clarify the situation for us all.
I'm still waiting to get in, Provost.
Sorry?
Still waiting to get in.
Who are you waiting there, Jim?
Yeah, I've been waiting patiently.
Do come in.
And Councillor MacLeod.
And MacLeod, right?
Thanks, Provost. You see in the chat function there that I mentioned the member budget working group and the sensitivity, but Councillor McCabe's already picked that one up. But the comment I would like to focus on is that both Councillor Alfield and Councillor Quinn reference to the Europe Regeneration Forum actively engaging with the Judy Murray Foundation. And I thought, well, wait a minute, there's a duplication here because the council pay Inverclyde Leisure quite a substantial sum to manage all our sports and leisure facilities. Now, why not just bin Inverclyde Leisure and we'll have the member, we'll have the Europe Regeneration Forum. They're obviously doing a similar task. Now, I think this drives to a governance issue here. There's a bit of a disjoint, whereas if a regeneration forum can go off on a tangent and do duplication or do things that's not in accord with the aims and objectives of the Inverclyde Council as a whole. So we need to try and reel that back in and try and get the governance correct to say what's getting discussed at these forums and what should be a viable project to go forward, or something that shouldn't be discussed. It should be going, for example, that's for an Inverclyde Leisure discussion with Inverclyde Council, that type of thing.
Jim, my apologies. I didn't realise that you were still waiting to make a contribution. No, thank you very much, Jim MacLeod. Jim.
Yes, thank you, Provost. Drew Mackenzie raised the matter of Barsbrae steps, and I have to concur with him that it wasn't just Drew that raised the matter. Drew, Robert, and myself all raised the matter about the steps, and of course, it's a matter of public safety. And if we can get the steps sorted ASAP, then that should be done. Particularly as there's a fair number of elderly people who live around that location. We don't want to get about tripped and break bones. So that's the first point. My question was, I'm not really sure if it's been answered here. The point that it was made by Ronnie Alfield, can I ask, were these matters brought up at a members' budget working group? Were they discussed, and if they were, what occurred from it? I appreciate there are certain sensitivities here, so even if you just give me a yes or no answer, that would give me some sort of indication. And the other thing is just to confirm that obviously if we do agree, each of the forums, the town centres and the villages retain their funding, then could we, I take it we would need to find anything up to £1 million from elsewhere in the revenue budget.
Thanks, Jim. Ronnie, Jim posed a question to you. Could you give a yes or no answer?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'll address that when I'm summing up. Thanks.
Right, okay.
All right, okay, so then
I think.
Right, okay, that's fine.
I think we may have arrived at the point where I will certainly need Gerald Malone's Gerald, I think we have, as far as we can gather, although at a 20-minute exodus from the meeting, could you sum up where we are?
Provost, just before Mr. Malone comes in, can we not simplify things? I would imagine that the independent councillors would like to homologate their own amendments, and could we have one single vote?
Right. Councillor McCabe is suggesting to the independent members that they merge their amendments so that we can proceed with one single vote. I mean, he made that clear. I'm just saying that again, double clarity, if you like.
Provost, if I can perhaps assist also. I'm sure that councillors might wish to contribute, but my advice to you would be that these are distinct and separate items. If they were wrapped up as composite motions, they could be put as an amendment together, but they are effectively separate items. If they were done on the basis of Councillor McCabe's motion and Councillor Alfell's amendment and Councillor Mackenzie's further amendment, it would not achieve, I think, what the elected members are trying to do in terms of making these a distinct and separate proposal for that part of the appendix. My advice would be to treat it separately, Provost, but I am in your hands, of course.
No. I mean, you're the wise man here. You know, I'm not saying for a moment, Gerard, that you're a wise guy, but I bow to your superior knowledge. Okay, right. So can you clarify the situation for us now?
Provost, if I were to clarify the situation, it would be this. There is a primary motion from Councillors McCabe and Clockerty in terms of recommendations 3.1 to 3.4 inclusive. That's been circulated. There is a separate proposal that Councillors Alfeld and Quinn propose an addition to paragraph 3.3, and I've written that down in the chat function, and it basically suggests consultation with all three community forums. I think Councillor Quinn was making that point, but I think if I've got the wording right, it covers all three community forums. There's a separate and different, distinct item relative to Councillor Mackenzie and to Councillor McVeigh's proposal that Bars Brae be not deferred. I would be proposing, Provost, that what would happen is that councillors would have an opportunity to sum up if there's any points that I've missed during the interruptions there, and Councillor McCabe finally has the opportunity to sum up his comments in the debate. Then we would proceed to a vote.
Excuse me, before we do that, could I just ask who caller user 3 is? I see we have a new participant.
Yes, it's Jim McLeod. After I asked my question, I actually got thrown out for some reason or other. I don't know, maybe my question was, I don't know, something wrong with it or whatever. But I think it was connection, and I will just go back in.
Okay, thank you.
So sorry, I also didn't hear the answer to my question. So apologies for that.
Provost, we're actually in the middle of a political debate. It's not the time for questions.
No, we're proceeding to the vote. Gerard, can you recapitulate on that? What are we doing now?
Provost, if you wish me to proceed to the vote.
Yeah.
The first vote I will...
Provost, do you have the opportunity to sum up?
Ronnie, yes, of course, yes. Gerard, on it.
Is that okay? Is that acceptable, Jerry?
Provost, the mover of the motion, which is Councillor McCabe, he has the right to sum up. But if you, Provost, wish to exercise your discretion for a brief summing up, considering the disruptions that we've been having, that's entirely proper for you to decide.
That's absolutely great, Gerard. Ronnie, I really do. I must say, you know, apparently you don't have the right to sum up, but you are going to sum up. But could you keep it as succinct as possible?
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, Provost. Thank you very much indeed. Well, first of all, what I would like to say is that if I have disclosed anything from the Management Budget Working Group, then I apologise. I don't believe that in my preamble I mentioned anything about the Management Budget Working Group in my discussions, but if I have, and people have taken it that way, then please accept my most sincere apologies on that. My point basically was that I did not believe that all members were aware of the background to a lot of the things basically that were going to be discussed today. I don't think that the majority of members were aware of the facts regarding this. So the motion today, or basically my suggestion today, is to let the individual forums decide on right backs. Now, Jim's point about not being aware of our proposals is exactly the point. We haven't had time to do that. We have been formulating and we haven't had the time to do that. And if I'm disappointed, then I'm disappointed that basically there's a suggestion here that members apparently are not going to be given the opportunity to make their own decisions in their own forums. And the last point I would make, Provost, is we are not basically suggesting no right backs. What we are suggesting is let the forums decide. And I mean, I can't really see that there's any kind of democratic deficit in that. Let the forums decide, and it may well be the decision will be, yeah, let's write back, but let's consult about it and let's do it. And my very last point, Provost, is, and I think I've put it on the chat room, that we did not approach Judy Murray's foundation; they came to us. Thanks
very much, Tony. Thank you, Stephen. Do you want to sum up?
Yeah, Provost. I mean, the discussions that Councillor Alford referred to in his opening remarks took place at the Members' Budget Working Group. He didn't say it took place at the Members' Budget Working Group, so they did take there. They couldn't have taken place in any other forum, so he did disclose that information. But I accept his apology, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the matter. Mr. Puckerin's report makes it clear that the proposals which are in the recommendations has the support of the significant majority of the members' budget working group and thereby the significant majority of the council. And all the groups who support the proposals which are in the recommendations all have had the opportunity to have those discussions within their own groups. So the proposals are supported by all political groups other than clearly those who have moved amendments today, which is the independent group. So I'm obviously asking for the support of the council for the recommendations in the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. I will proceed with the votes if that's acceptable to you.
Yes, of course, Gerard. Yeah.
The first vote is in respect of Councillor Alfeld's amendment to paragraph 3.3. So Councillor Alfeld's amendment is, as I've written in the chat function, I will sum up as consultation with the town centre forums. That would be the amendment. So I'll call for the votes, which will be paragraph 3.3 per the motion, or the amendment consultation with the town centre forums. Is that okay, Provost?
Yes, it is.
I will proceed with Councillor Alfeld. Motion or amendment for consultation?
Amendment.
Councillor Brooks.
Motion.
Councillor Clockerty.
Motion.
Councillor Crowther.
Motion.
Councillor Curley.
Motion.
Councillor Dorian.
Motion.
Councillor Jackson.
Motion.
Councillor MacLeod.
Motion.
Councillor McCabe.
Motion.
Councillor McCormick.
Motion.
Councillor McElhaney. Councillor Chris McElhaney. I beg your pardon. Councillor Chris McElhaney, please. Provost, I will return to Councillor Chris McElhaney. Councillor Jim McElhaney.
Motion.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Amendment.
Councillor McVeigh.
Amendment.
Councillor Moran.
Motion.
Councillor Murphy.
Motion.
Councillor Nelson.
Motion.
Councillor Quinn.
Amendment.
Councillor Becky.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Motion. Motion. Motion.
Okay, I'm coming back to Councillor Chris McElhaney to see if Councillor Chris McElhaney is able to cast his vote. I see that he's on screen. Provost, I cannot get any response from Councillor Chris McElhaney. I'm going to ask you, Provost, for your vote, please.
Motion.
Provost, in the circumstances, I'm going to treat Councillor McElhaney as not casting his vote because of technological difficulties. On that basis, there are 17 votes for the motion. There are 4 votes for the amendment. I declare paragraph 3.3 motion carried. Could I deal with the second vote, please, Provost? Same motion, paragraph 3.3. The amendment is Councillor Mackenzie's and Councillor McVeigh's, which is not to defer Barsbury. Hopefully that sums up that point. I'll proceed with the vote in the same manner. Motion or the amendment for not to defer Barsbury. Councillor Alfeld.
Amendment.
Councillor Brooks.
Motion.
Councillor Clougherty.
Motion.
Councillor Crowder.
Motion.
Councillor Curley.
Motion.
Councillor Dorian.
Motion.
Councillor Jackson.
Motion.
Councillor MacLeod.
I abstain.
Abstention, thank you. Councillor McCabe.
Motion.
Councillor McCormick. Just Councillor McCormick, Provost.
Motion. Motion.
Motion from Councillor McCormick, thank you. Councillor Chris McElhaney. I'm receiving quite considerable feedback there, but I'm not receiving any indication. I'll come back to that. Councillor Jim McElhaney.
Motion.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Amendment.
Councillor McVeigh.
Amendment.
Councillor Moran.
Motion.
Councillor Murphy.
Yeah.
Councillor Murphy. Provost, I'm going to have to return to Councillor Murphy. Councillor Nelson.
Motion.
Councillor Quinn.
Amendment.
Councillor Rebecca.
Councillor motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
And Councillor Wilson.
Motion. Motion.
I return to Councillor Chris McElhaney. There is no vote cast. I return to Councillor Murphy. There's no vote cast. Provost, your vote, please.
Motion.
Provost. I declare that there are 15 votes for the motion. There are 4 votes for the amendment. There is 1 abstention. There are 2 absent votes on my record. I declare the motion carried. I declare the revised items 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 and 3.4 passed otherwise. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we now proceed.
Provost, I think some of the echoes might be because David's on twice. If you look at it, he's on twice.
David, I don't see this.
He's down the bottom line. Thing there, but he's photographed the front.
Diane, can you check?
Okay. I think we'll just proceed and someone will work at that channel.
That can't be, Provost. The vote has cast. We'll have to move on. Thank you very much, Mrs. Carrick. Thank you.
Just on that, I've been having issues tonight repeatedly with all of us, and I literally came out and went straight back in. So I understand that the vote has passed, but I think that we really need to consider what's been causing the issues this evening.
Provost, I am most regretful of the situation with Councillor Murphy. That's why I returned, as all members would know at that point. I'm afraid, in terms of setting a precedent, the correct thing to do, the vote is passed, and we'll have to move on. But I do regret having to say that to Councillor Murphy, and she will appreciate that I don't say that lightly. Thank you.
That was regrettable, Natasha. But you know, given that, yes, thanks very much, Natasha. Oops.
Myself now.
Okay, Natasha, didn't quite get that, but we'll move on or proceed to COVID-19. Now, item 10, COVID-19 online counselling committee meetings. You'll find it on page 165. Back in September at the council meeting, we agreed to have a report on online remote meetings at the end of the full cycle of meetings and boards. This meeting today marks the end of that cycle. So some remote meetings have been frustrating. You said it. I've lost connectivity a couple of times and no one noticed. On a personal level, that's quite hurtful. But face-to-face meetings can be just as frustrating and it's hurtful. Gerard, do you want to speak in this?
Yes, Provost, and I think I should actually try to make sure my remarks are particularly pertinent to all members' experiences of this just now. The Council has requested me to do the review of the cycle of meetings. And Provost, in all seriousness, with all of the difficulties that we have experienced today, which have been signal and they have been legion in terms of today's meeting, the meeting platform that we have just now is providing councillors with a sound governance system for engagement on key business items. I fully accept the issues and difficulties that members are having, for example, tonight, in participating with this meeting. But as an officer's review, and in terms of what must actually take place for the proper conduct of a major public sector body such as the Council, subject to all of the regulatory functions and the regulatory checks, the systems that we have adopted over the course of the past 2 months, indeed 4 months, are entirely sound and robust for means of scrutiny, member engagement and involvement. I would have to hazard that every single and different type of platform has its own difficulties. We even see this on the national news programmes with breakups of signal. And I do not mean to be in any way diminishing of the difficulties. It is frustrating to members. I genuinely believe in the pressure that's on members' time and their entire scrutiny role. I set out in the report what are key principles, and they are all the more pertinent even for tonight's experience. And the key principles are contained on page 167 and are derived, Provost, from you and from your members of this council in terms of what we must do, even with tonight's difficulties. And in paragraph 4.3, I need to ensure that all members are aware of those points about training and support, and we have support from our ICT colleagues in full. I need to make sure that members are aware of the Scottish Government's guidance in terms of public gatherings and meetings, and we must observe as community leaders the Scottish Government guidance. I need to reflect on the public health restrictions which cause us to have meetings such as this and which stop us from having the meetings that we want to get back to as quickly as possible, the effective face-to-face meetings. And we might change that in the future in terms of future new ways of working. That's totally acceptable. We want to make sure we do that from a position of strength. Most of all, Provost, and I can say this to you frankly and to the other members, we as officers have to make sure that there is elected member confidence, and that confidence is maintained in all aspects of what we're going through in the COVID pandemic just now, so that you've got adequate participation in decision making and you're satisfied with the scrutiny. We promised. I know that I'm an uphill gradient on today's experience, but these key principles need to be reflected upon, and that's the basis of this report. Up to tonight, I'd suggested we'd had one bad experience with the Education and Communities Committee, and with the brevity that you want me to address just now, I will say there's two suggestions. We as officers, particularly the corporate directors, who are responsible for the agenda makeup, will be very business focused, and we'll put information-only reports out separately. We will concentrate on agendas to keep them short and succinct. Secondly, it's my proposal that in order to facilitate the education and community separation of business, that a 1 PM start to that be trialled, Provost, trialled, to see if that assists us with the functioning of the committee, because there are issues there that did arise. Lastly, Provost, I will say that this council is doing very well. And I'm not saying this from myself, I'm saying this from the external appreciation that I've got from other solicitors in terms of the quasi-judicial function. Yes, there have been occasional problems, and there was a problem today at the licensing board. But we make facilities available at quasi-judicial functions that are very sound. For the planning board and for the local review body, we have to, in terms of members' aspirations, attempt to live webcast for public transparency and engagement those meetings where members of the public do not have a right of, are not entitled to participate. So we've been trying to put that on live webcasting, and Provost, that work is very current. We are taking a report to the next week's corporate management team. I can say to you, Provost, I can also specifically say to the planning convener that we will be wanting to trial publicly the webcasting for the planning board that's scheduled for January. I am also very aware of the special statutory processes that we will have to address above and beyond webcasting for certain key planning application business that will involve participation of members of the public. And we are working on that, and you have not only my assurance, but the assurance of the CMT in terms of trying to bring that forward in a way that is satisfactory for the extremely necessary quasi-judicial standards of that type of special public meeting. So, Provost, even with today's difficulties, I'm commending this report to your attention. I am sure there'll be many questions, but I do think that the Scottish Government guidance make it clear that no officer could recommend that we have face-to-face meetings, and we do not have the facility for hybrid meetings. Therefore, this platform, which will be moved away from, because my report does reflect on the move over to the summer of 2021 into the Microsoft Teams and the Microsoft 365 cloud-based technology. That is ongoing work as well, Provost, in order to ensure that officers are supporting members as fully as possible. Thank you, Provost. I hope I haven't gone on too much, but I thought the situation merited it, given today's experience.
Quite. And part of what you were saying was that over the past 4 months, we've had a lot of business to cope with, and quite patently, we have done that. We've got through the business.
I must have driven in then.
Thanks, Provost. I have an amendment to the paper, but I don't know if it's the right time just now to bring it. I'll take your advice and Gerard's advice in terms of that, but I do have an amendment I'd like to bring forward.
Provost, as yet, thank you to Councillor Robertson. Of course, as ever, there's no motion as yet, so it's a question of any member wishing to move a motion. It would be taken as thus. Thank you.
Apologies. Thank you.
Do you want to propose a motion now, Elizabeth?
Yes, please.
Yes, right.
Thank you, Provost. So it's really just a replacement for the wording at recommendation 3.3. I'll put it out for everybody to see on the chat function, if that's okay. So replacing the wording at recommendation 3.3 with approval to be given to the altered start time of the Education and Communities Committee of 1 p.m. for the communities items for the next committee cycle, with a report coming back to the next relevant meeting of full council regarding the potential separation of communities and education into two committees. And the reason I'm bringing that forward is really because I just feel that the 1 p.m. start, I think we have to do this time. There's not any time to do anything different, but I do believe that it's one of those situations where the amount of work is going to extend to fit the amount of time that we have available for it, and therefore the more sensible thing in the long term may well be separating the two functions of that committee into two separate committees.
Elizabeth, in essence, is what you're saying that there should be two different committees?
Not for the coming cycle, but that we should get a paper about the possibility of doing so and having them as two separate committees thereafter. Thank you, Provost.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Elizabeth. Jim McElhaney.
Thanks, Provost. I'm looking at the paper, paragraph 4.3, item 4. Elected member confidence is necessary and is maintained. Now, I don't know if there's any councillor or elected members that have any confidence whatsoever in our online WebEx system. The reason why I say that is it's not the actual platform itself, because I access it via my own personal computer, thereby bypassing the council VPN system. The issue is the VPN, because I've not had one problem today with connectivity because I'm not using the council's system. So I think that's the heart of the problem, that IT really needs to go away and look at that, is to say, what can we do? What can we do? Can we purchase another VPN? Is it this VPN we've got unreliable, unstable, that type of thing?
Okay. Is that a proposal, Jim?
The IT should just take that on board. Maybe Mr. Malone will
I
take that
see.
in.
That's a comment.
I don't know if we've had any IT guys. Did Alan join, or did not manage to get him to join?
Right. Now, I understand that Alan Puckran would like to say something. Alan, are you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm here, and I am aware, picking up Jim's point there, that is something that Alan and the team are looking at regarding access without going through the VPN. They'll appreciate that it's a lot of it's around security, and him and the team are looking at a double pipe solution where certain traffic can go through the VPN and certain traffic doesn't have to go through the VPN. So Alan is acutely aware, and I know that he is aware that and I think has offered out bits of kit to specific councillors who've been experiencing difficulties, so they can use that without going through the VPN. They can use it as a personal device, and that would back up what Jim is saying there, that without going through the VPN, the connectivity is better.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Lynn.
Yeah, just got a couple of points to make. I think it's just to echo the points that I said. We're in a global pandemic and things are slightly, things are inconvenienced, but, the whole world is inconvenienced, so we kind of just need to suck it up and get on with it, really, because public health and public safety and obviously safety of ourselves and officers is paramount to anything else. So I just want, first of all, to say well done to the IT department. I think I mentioned before, it's a sort of minor miracle that's happened that we've got us all sort of technically enabled in such a fast time. I realise we have problems, but they've been quickly trying to resolve them. So I just want to pass the thanks on to that. I've just got a quick question about hardware. Obviously, we got the email around saying we have PC laptops or another Surface Pro. Actually, talking to that I know, it said that the Surface Pro is really a note taker, occasional use and portable. It is not meant for day-to-day use of on the digital platforms. you should absolutely go for a laptop. So I'm just concerned that we're being offered more Surface Pros when clearly probably our needs are actual laptop. So if we can kind of look at that, because I wouldn't want every council at the bank another Surface Pro and it doesn't meet the needs. But when I actually asked for my laptop, I was looking to explore the possibility of having a new laptop with our Surface Pro just being with the WebEx app, so we don't need to go through VPN. So if our own laptop fails, we've got a Surface Pro that there is no need. It's pretty much white and there's no need to actually go through the VPN. So that's just maybe something. Just my last point is, can Mr. Malone clarify what is the rules regarding our alios? So we have a number of alios that we're actually members of, board members of, and there has been a kind of push towards physical presence at meetings, and some of them are actually, I would class as small gatherings of 15 people, and I have a bit of a concern that we've maybe been pushed along having physical meetings for some of our alios. So if we can check the rules, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I wonder, Alan, can you answer everyone's questions?
I can probably do better than that, Provost, because Alan MacDonald has been able to join the meeting and he will be able to answer the points that Lynn made.
Yeah, Alan.
Yep. Afternoon, councillors. First of all, apologies for what I believe has been a torturous meeting this afternoon. As I'm sure you've been told, I have been trying to monitor what's been going on, but most of what I haven't been able to do anything to make anything better, unfortunately. Just to answer Councillor Quinn's question, yes. One of the things that we've done today is we're doing that giving Councillor Wilson, for instance, a tablet to use specifically for WebEx. If that works okay, then that will be an option that we can offer to other elected members as well. Your point regarding the choice between a Surface Pro and a laptop, not all elected members use a Surface Pro as much as others. So in some instances, it may be more appropriate for an elected member to retain a Surface Pro. That's why we've given you all the option. But certainly, speaking from my own experience, I've moved from a Surface Pro to a laptop in the last few months because I felt it wasn't powerful enough. So yeah, I fully appreciate that, and that's why we're giving elected members the option.
Okay. There was a question.
Yes, Provost, of course. An ALIO is an entirely separate organisation, and I would observe that the Scottish Government guidance and the Scottish Government rules apply to this council and to any other entity. So I would certainly be suggesting to any elected member who's concerned about this that matter should be brought to the attention of the respective ALIO for fair challenge, especially at board level. And I wouldn't want to perhaps comment at this public meeting in respect of any individual ALIO, but certainly the terms of guidance to be administered by each individual party are very clear, and that we should be avoiding any public gatherings themselves. But I'm happy to speak with Councillor Quinn on the specific matter offline, because it does affect the business interests of a separate body.
Of course. Thanks very much, Gerard. Natasha?
Thank you, Provost. So last time we discussed this at full council, I was very complimentary about the way that I'd been working, because I had only experienced a couple of hiccups, which was expected when you use technology. However, it has seemed to have actually gotten worse rather than better, with it culminating in this evening's meeting. But my question was more around, why do we have to wait until summer 2021? There's clearly a fundamental issue with either some tech on our side or the actual package itself, because I'm assuming the summer 2021 is because we've got a license for a year with WebEx. So I'm assuming that's the issue. But actually, if the software isn't working to our business needs, then surely that's a breach of contract of some sort.
Could either Alan respond to that? No?
Yep. Happy to do that. I'm assuming we're discussing about the migration to Microsoft Teams. I think I missed that bit of the conversation. The issue is that it's quite a long process to migrate from our current licensing infrastructure onto Microsoft 365, which Teams is part of. For instance, I know that colleagues over in ClickManager have just awarded a tender, have completed the tender process for their licensing, and they started that in January of this year. So as you can see, obviously COVID interrupted that process, but they're a very similar size organisation to us. So for us, we're just starting that process 6-7 months later than we anticipated. But we will try and accelerate it as much as we can, but we need to be in a position where we have accurate information to go to tender, because this will be a multi-million pound over the term of the contract. It will be a multi-million pound commitment by the council with Microsoft. So it's not something that we can simply just go and buy some licenses, because it envelops the entire infrastructure from our server licensing, our desktop licensing, our office licensing, Teams, cloud provision. So it's in the first instance, it's many hundreds of thousands of pounds. So it's simply not a case of just simply switching from one supplier to the other. There is a lot of steps that we need to take before we migrate. And as I say, we'll accelerate it as much as we can. But that's the reason why we are saying that it's unlikely we'll be able to migrate before summer of next year.
Well, I understand that.
Natasha.
Yeah, I was just going to come back on it and just say I understand that obviously we've got not just procurement processes but other processes we need to do with that, but it is actually hindering the democratic process, in that the meetings are taking a lot longer than people intend them to take. It's disrupting conversation, it's disrupting the actual process that we're going through. And this evening there's been at least 2 votes where 2 members haven't been able to vote. So actually, albeit it's weighted measures that we need to balance it up with, it has caused significant impact on the way that this council has been run. Thank you, Provost. That's me done.
Jim?
Yeah, Provost. Yeah, thanks for coming to me. Yeah, I mean, just basically the same observations that other people are having. It is very difficult. I know that I connect by phone. I seem to be getting the blame for a lot of this. It's my phone that's causing it, but I can assure everybody I mute my phone when I'm not speaking. So, and there's been other meetings I've attended with the phone where there's not been any problem. So I don't think it's at my end. But yeah, the sooner we can get things resolved, the better.
Right. Yes, I think everyone echoes that. Okay.
My point of order was that David Wilson had a contribution but was unable to link. So I just didn't know whether that's been amended. I know that Diane has been trying to help in the background. So there's a member who's unable to speak unless it has been solved.
I think I'm in now.
Kind of you.
Yes, can I just say, Provost, in answer to what I've heard so far, there are members of the public sector who are using physical meetings. I, on Monday, have a meeting at SPT, a meeting where there will be people at with social distancing. So we're obeying Scottish Government rules with social distancing. Certainly, as far as my experience in the last couple of months, there was October's planning, October's licensing, November's education, December's licensing this morning, and this afternoon with the council meeting. All of them have had serious problems that have really affected and the democratic process. The system is not working. We really need to be honest about it. We're kidding ourselves if we. I use Microsoft Teams, and I was very pleased to hear from Alan that we're going to migrate at some stage to Microsoft Teams. Renfrewshire Council and OSPT, they use Microsoft Teams, and I've never experienced any problem with them. The full partnership meeting, the SPT, is up to about 40 people. It's worked okay. What really is concerning me with regard to planning, we've got two major planning applications at the moment. One has been waiting 9 months to be heard, and it's getting really quite serious. Now, we need to hear these. I don't think that WebEx is going to be able to hack it. I really don't. And it was interesting, Gerard, in what you were saying. Are you in some way considering perhaps scoping the town hall, that if we cannot get WebEx to work, we would have a physical hearing on a major planning application in the town hall? Can I gather that from what you said?
Through me,
Provost, just to clarify, thank you. I believe that it will be possible to have a webcast and WebEx public participation for these significant planning application processes. And I believe that the trials for that, which need to be undertaken because we are in a serious litigation level of area here, we're talking here about, I'm trying not to specify the actual planning applications, so we're in a serious level here of potential litigation risk. So we've got to get it right, so we've got to trial this, and I'm assuring Councillor Wilson as chair of the planning board that we are actively pursuing the webcasting and virtual remote access to these statutory meetings so that they can take place in a regulated, clear, early as possible time. I'm not suggesting at all that we go to the town hall. I do think that no officer of this council could suggest that a face-to-face meeting in the town hall, even with the distancing that's involved there, would allow such a matter to take place, given the public interest in that, and the virtual online meeting might suffice if we can trial it and get that underway. Thank you for that clarification, Provost.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Gerard.
Sorry, Provost, could I ask Gerard, what if the webcast doesn't work?
Provost, I will report directly to Councillor Wilson as chair. I'll make sure he knows every single part of those reasons. If it doesn't work, in that eventuality, we will consider other contingencies. But I cannot sign up to a town hall meeting because that would be against Scottish Government guidelines at this time. But I will revert to Councillor Wilson on that matter.
I'd like to be clear on that one. Others are doing it.
Okay. I think we have a question from Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I'll be brief since my son's desperately wanting his tea. Clearly, the level of disruption tonight has been unacceptable. There's no getting away from that, and we need to look into that and find out why and try to address it. We simply cannot have another full council meeting like this. Absolutely not. But in terms of this, the substance of what's being proposed by Elizabeth, Labour Group doesn't have any difficulty in terms of what's been proposed. That's not to say we're committing at this point in time to have two separate committees. We're open-minded about the pros and cons of that. So we're happy for the report to come forward in due course, but we wouldn't at this point in time commit to supporting that option, but certainly happy for it to be explored. But in the meantime, we obviously need to move forward with the next meeting, so I'm fine with what's being proposed.
Provost, to clarify, is Councillor McCabe seconding the motion with that clarification?
Stephen,
I don't know if we formally need a seconder because I'm not so sure we're going to have a disagreement. But if we do need a seconder, I'm happy to second it.
Thank you, Provost.
One comment
I've already made my comments, Provost. Thanks.
To tell the truth, that everyone is doing their best and to come in the chairs and boards and work of the council done, and all officers from really fast work.
Provost, we have a unanimous approach by the council in that paragraph 3.3 will be amended as written on the chat function, it being noted that there's no commitment to the outcome, but per Councillor Robertson's proposal as seconded by Councillor McCabe.
Right, thank you very much. Item 11, the councillors Scottish Government consultation. A major review of the conduct for bodies. The February, sorry, the 8th of February. Opportunities to respond on a corporate basis, group basis, and or individual basis. Okay.
And if you wish, Provost, I will have an all members briefing to go over the actual details of the code. As you've said, the recent member seminar was very helpful in terms of reviewing the new thrust of those proposals in terms of the actual purpose behind the revisals. Some fairly significant items, and members are encouraged to either respond individually or through groups, or if a corporate response is required, I'm happy to have an all members briefing at your direction, Provost, at any point in December or January.
So we can agree the recommendation.
Agreed.
So, investigation public the bylaw to operation in December 2010, and we are obliged to review it within 10 years.
Again, exactly as you've just stated there, Provost, this would come back, if approved by the Council tonight, to the April meeting of the Council. It's the first stage of the consultation process, and thereafter it would require to be part of a full public consultation. As the report itself says, we have to take account of any changes to our area in the past 10 years in terms of any developments, and we have to forecast any developments in the future in terms of anything that might actually be happening, any housing developments in the future, in order to make sure that the bylaws, as amended after consultation, will be enforceable. Happy to answer any questions, Provost, but it's really the start of the process, and members will have an opportunity to influence that in April and beyond.
Right, are there any questions? Therefore, this is like
Thank you, Provost. Something nice and uncontentious. As you've said, Provost, the risk register is based on previous Operation Yellowhammer from last year, as members will be aware, and sort of updated risk profiles for the UK as a whole. So there are one or two risks here that are very much Inverclyde centric, but a lot of them are risks that apply, as you say, across Scotland and the UK. Obviously, we have held back on bringing this report as long as possible in order to hopefully have been able to bring you a report that actually said this is what's going to happen. Clearly, we can't do that. So the main recommendation of this report is that we bring a report back to the February meeting of the Council, updating on the short-term outcome of withdrawal. So by then we will know which of these risks, depending on the deal or whether there's a deal or no, have actually been realised and which are still coming over the horizon. So I'm quite happy to take any questions on any of the detail, but we will be bringing a full report back to the February meeting.
So a full report back to February. Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Martin, if there's significant problems at the channel ports if we don't get an agreement and it results in the ocean container terminal becoming a lot busier, have we identified a lorry park, for want of a better word, or is that something we'll be looking to do as we get a better understanding of what's going to happen?
So I think there is, as you'll have noticed, there is a risk relating to increased traffic at the ocean, potential for increased traffic at the ocean terminal. I think that's probably unlikely in the short term. I think that's probably more of a medium-term risk, or medium-term risk, a bleak opportunity, if one's entirely honest, I suppose. That it's not going to be instant. I think if there's any uptake on other routes initially into the UK, avoiding the Channel crossing, it's more initially to be East Coast ports, which are more immediately accessible from the continent. But this is more for looking at the kind of medium term and what might happen. So we still have time to look at that. But there'll be implications, obviously, as you say, on lorry traffic. There'll be implications on checks of incoming and outgoing goods. There'll be quite a number of things we'll have to consider. So hopefully by February, we'll have an idea of what planning is looking like around about that, and we can come back to the committee with that. But I doubt very much that there'll be an initial spike in activity at the ocean terminal.
Okay, thanks, Martin.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Tommy. Elizabeth.
Thank you, Provost. My question is really about, it's provoked by Appendix 2. And just looking at the issue of the structural funds implications, and I'm just wondering if we're having another report, if we can get more detail on how that's looking. And I'm just thinking, is this an alliance matter? Is this a matter for Inverclyde Alliance? Because structural funds are going to affect more than just our economic development service and our employability programmes and things like that. It's going to impact in the college and Scottish Enterprise, and I just think to avoid paralysis, wherever we can possibly avoid paralysis, and get in front of the lie of the land as much as we possibly can. Is it something that we maybe want to discuss there too? I'm just wondering what the plans are, if that can be included in February's meeting as well, Provost. Thank you.
Elizabeth, is that two questions for Martin? Yes.
I guess it is, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Martin.
So, Provost, separating those out, yes, I think it's entirely a matter for, or appropriate for, the Alliance, and probably should be discussed there. And secondly, in terms of updating Council in February, hopefully by February we will have a better idea of the shape of, and it's not just the structural funds, but obviously any other funds that are going to be dispersed to replace any EU funding. So we'll bring an update as best we can to the February committee, and then if needs be, that can certainly go to the Alliance for further discussion.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Thank you, Elizabeth. Do we agree the recommendations?
Martin,
sorry, Jim, apologies. Right, profuse apologies.
I know I'm like the invisible man here, I know.
Right.
Anyway, I just think we're in an awful position with literally a few weeks ago, to be in a position that we still don't know where we're going on this. Absolutely dreadful. And, you know, got a report, and, you know, there's as many questions to still remain unanswered, and it's a very uncertain future for all of us, not just in Inverclyde, but Scotland and the UK as well. It's just absolutely dreadful. I was going to raise a point that was raised about ESF and ERDF funding as well, and, you know, how had we seen any indication as to what was going to happen there. But my other thing was, you know, I'm reading about food prices. You know, I've seen some reports saying food prices, much of what we get from EU states might rise by as much as 18%. So it's looking at poverty levels, and do we intend to perhaps have more workers employed and help and support people to fill in benefit forms or whatever else if it's needed in that direction. And the other concern for me is medicines. There is a number of medicines that you know, we get from other countries, including this vaccine that it's just about to be released. And whilst we're getting some orders next week, you know, what's going to happen if it's stuck in ferry points or on lorries or whatever in the coming months? Thanks.
Right, thanks very much, Jim. I mean, I'd imagine the answers to some of those are unknown, but Martin, can you help Jim with those questions?
So if we come to the, I can't answer the question on additional benefits advisors at this point. I mean, that's obviously a question maybe the council might want to consider in February when we come back, when we can see the initial impact. But certainly the risk seems to indicate that there isn't a suggestion that there'll be an overall shortage of food, but certainly there is a risk that food prices will rise, and quite clearly that will disproportionately affect low-income groups without a shadow of a doubt. So that is a real risk that we need to address, and hopefully we'll know what that looks like a bit better in February. In terms of the medicines risk, I think I far away from me to actually put actions into anybody's minds, but I suspect that jobs will probably be pulled out in terms of vaccine deliveries, but there certainly is a risk round about sort of medicine, and that's recognised. We have taken what action can be taken locally to address that, and the HSCP has a smoothing reserve to help with purchasing of medicines. So there are regular meetings between the HSCP and the Health Board to discuss that, and that will certainly be kept under review.
Yes, thanks, Martin. I understand, Jim, that Alan Puckrin may also be able to add something to discussion. Alan.
Thank you, Provost. The issue that members may recall at one of the early reports, there was a question asked about how much was a sort of a broad brush estimate of what the inflationary pressures could be on the council budgets, and part of that was around food, and within the budget figures that we're looking at, and we looked at earlier in the agenda, there is an allowance for that. As far as support for the community, obviously at the moment there's probably an unprecedented level of extra support going into the community because of COVID, and I think it will be, you know, we'll be looking at the effectiveness of these measures and whether the funding needs to be tweaked a bit going forward, and part of that will be members' consideration of use of the anti-poverty £1 million, and the plan would be to bring that to the Policy and Resources Committee either at the February meeting or at the March meeting, and obviously the experience of what's actually happened since the 1st of January will feed into that.
Thank you, Jim. Do you agree with the recommendations? Yes, I take it we do. Right, agreed. Item 14 is a proposed TRO for disabled persons parking places. Do we agree the recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Item 15 is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report 2020 to 21. A remit from Policy and Resources Committee, and it has been discussed extensively there. Do you agree with the recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Item 16. Am I the correct one, Gerard? Yes. Item 16. Sorry.
Yes, Provost.
Right, thank you, Gerard. The Trust Fund's annual accounts, 2019 to 20. Now, at this stage, the Council is acting as a Board of Trustees. As such, we are asked to approve and review the annual accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2020. Now, that's last March. Okay.
Martin, can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Provost. Sorry. The question is, I think this is maybe one I asked some time ago, but just to seek up-to-date clarification on it. There are two trusts here that have been presented to us today, and I mean, I thought all charitable bodies or trusts, there had to be at least one meeting a year, and obviously you'd have at least two directors listed. I know that Provost is seen as the chair, and the secretariat is taken on by officials, so that answers that. But we don't have a meeting as such. What we get is this annual report. Is that annual report seen as the one meeting a year, so as it fulfills our legal obligations on that matter? And my second question is, there's only two trusts here before us. I know we've wound up a lot of trusts because Michael McCormick and myself had raised that, some time ago about the trusts, and they looked at all the trusts. A lot of them were dissolved, the money dispersed in worthy causes were aligned to some of those trusts. But is there not more trusts, or at least one or two trusts haven't been reported to date we still have within the Council's remit?
I obviously can't, I can't answer those questions. I'm going to defer to Gerard.
Provost, as you have said, this is the meeting of the trustees of the two trusts. We are meeting our legal obligations by doing so. If the trustees wished further meetings, or if the officers were to suggest that, they would of course be brought forward. There has been quite a substantial realignment of trusts and our charitable contributions or charitable bodies. That is not my speciality. At that point, I have to defer to the Chief Financial Officer. They'll be able to assist with that point.
Thank you, Provost. I mean, there was a huge exercise carried out about 7-8 years ago, which reduced the number of trusts by about 20. Because what was happening is that these trusts were effectively being exhausted by governance fees, accountants charging fees and auditors charging fees, and it was decided that it would be better, in consultation with Oscar, to wind up these trusts and disperse the fund, and that's what Councillor MacLeod is remembering. These are the only two trusts where all 22 councillors are trustees, which is why these come here. Separate to that, you've got the Peter Stanton Trust, which a number of councillors are on, and they meet separately and consider the dispersal of funds for that. But other than that, they're the only ones which councillors are the trustees of at this point in time.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Jim. I think that's a fairly full answer there. Stephen.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Paragraph 4.4 of the covering report identifies that there's a usable revenue reserve of just over £100,000 in the Buckmire Trust. Can I request that officers with responsibility for maintaining Buckmire Park engage with Kilmacombe Community Council to look at potentially how this usable reserve could be utilised to enhance the amenities of the park, and that consultation takes place with the Chief Financial Officer around what appropriate sum it would be, what the appropriate sum would be to use from this reserve for that purpose.
Can you, Gerard, elaborate on that? Or
Provost, there is a motion as a trustee that officers engage the Kilmacombe Community Council to look at items to potentially improve the amenity of the park, consultation with the Chief Financial Officer in terms of any appropriate sums, and presumably a report back on that matter. That's a competent proposal, promised. In terms of the trustees, it would be a matter that would be delegated to officers through the Chief Financial Officer to consider in terms of sums.
Right.
They're entirely competent.
Yeah. So can we agree the recommendation with the notification of which Stephen has just mentioned? Are those agreed?
Agreed.
Yes, agreed. Right, okay.
Provost, I can assist members just for the sake of time. I've checked the participants level and we're in private session. If you, Provost, would move the exclusion of the press and the public, Mrs. McGee and Mrs. Sweeney will confirm that I'm correct. There are no members of the press or public present.
I move the exclusion of the press and